And guys, before video start I wanted to say that this is part 2 of this video, so if you haven't seen it yet, pause this one, go watch the beginning of the story and let's move towards our goal of 100,000 subscribers so that I can bring more and more stories for you. And let's go to this video, which is insane. And Jean speaks to his mother's Fasih like the mission his sisters gave him. He says he knows it's a dangerous place, but he doesn't think it's unfair. He says he thinks it's a sign of how skilled his sister thinks he is, and she gets indignant hearing this. He asks if that's not why she gave him this mission, and his mother says that he is banning him so much and asks if he is testing her, but he says that it is nothing like that. He says that if the assignment of a mission changes suddenly they would be showing it to his followers. Clan hierarchy and their power dynamics are fragile, and his mother says that they don't have followers who doubt their clan for such insignificant reasons, and she says that his sisters simply want to hurt the boy, and she says that since they can't hurt him directly they are abusing of his authority. He says that this is the point he is trying to reach. If he were to fight them now he would lose, but he can change that by completing this mission. He says that this is a fight where he has a chance of winning, and she says that a mistake in the ruins Cologne could be fatal and asks if he really is that confident, and he says yes. And he has something he would like to ask for. He says that if he manages to return this mission he wants to keep the swords that his brothers are giving, and the boy says this is the least he wants to receive as a reward, considering that this is a mission that his own mother considered dangerous. She keeps thinking his brothers start to ask why he would keep the swords they are handing out. If he really wants a sword so much he can give one of the ones he has for him, so he tells him to give up on this mission. That he needs to stay alive until his father returns, but Jean says that this is strange because if that was the problem they should have stopped Anne and Mealy when they were dealing with this mission. So his mother asks them to stop, and she says that if he manages to complete the mission she will give his brothers swords, and then she asks everyone to leave. And the boy's mother thinks that because she is worried that Jean could end up with a student she trampled on the other children's pride, but she thinks she worried for nothing, and when Soren comes back she will be happy to see how well Jean is growing up. So outside the room Annie asks him what he thinks. He is thinking Tana if the boy thinks luck will be on his side again, so he says he doesn't know and says that they might not know, but he is very unlucky, and she says that this is the end of his relaxed attitude. After all, this is not an individual mission, so he will not be alone on his journey to hell, and he thanks them for their consideration and says that he will see them later. So at the moment of departure Mayo Hearts introduces himself to him, and another says he is Hema Hearts, and they say that it is an honor to go on the mission with him, and says that he would like to apologize for your past behavior. And in this everyone tries to be friendly with Jean, and he tells them to leave everything aside and work well together, so they agree to it. But Jean thinks what honor doesn't exist for them because the three of them are Mio and Anne's lackeys, so they are planning to attack him behind his back in a dangerous place. And so one of them explains the mission, saying that they need to steal relics, and the location is the ruins of Cologne, and they have a total of 4 relics as their objective. And Jean talks a little about the ruins of Cologne, and it was a place where a few thousand natives used to live in tribes, and currently it is the territory controlled by the Zip clan is within the Pelin kingdom, and Cologne was discovered a few hundred years ago by the Zip Bell, and when they discovered the ruins they killed and enslaved most of the natives, and of course the Zip Bell clan. Now he says he respects the natives of Cologne, but that's just to keep up appearances. It may seem as if they are respected, but they are still slaves, and there is nothing being done to improve their states, since the lives and rights of the native of Cologne are not of importance to most people. And the reason the Zipfolk kept the natives alive is to manage Cologne's natural environment and show regret for the atrocities of their past, and the Zipfolk clan normally aims for reasonable government, seeking the natural obedience of those they rule. In the meantime past they crossed there in Cologne, and the reason why they became obsessed with the ruins to the point of sacrificing their own reputation is likely to be for the mirror artifact hidden by the natives. And he says that the existence of the mirror is still confidential information known only to the Zipful clan, but the truth was exposed before he returned thanks to a brave journalist, and in the article written by him there was a statement that Zipful's actions were to find a certain artifact, and the name of the artifact obtained from the testimony of the natives was the source of mana, that by looking at it you can take your mana to the 7-star level, and by using this the Zipful were able to create mages mass-produced. And Jim thinks that the Zipful clan will start mass-producing mages 10 years in the future. That means they still haven't been able to find the mana source, so he won't let Zip get his hands on it this time. So everyone says that the mages are returning, that 2 locations are quarters for the Zipful mages, while the relics they are looking for are in the 3rd warehouse, and they say that it won't be difficult to ambush them, but they probably have a barrier spell. But the guy who has already taken 2 beatings tells him not to worry because they will protect you no matter what, even if it costs their lives. And Jean sees all this blah 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 and thanks them for the comfort, and he says that for them to stay safe during their return they need to conserve energy, so they will take a break and attack in an hour, and they agree to it. And Jean tells them to take 1 each, and when they bite into that dried meat he says that he is going alone, asking them to sleep well, and when they ask what he means all 3 of them start to fall. After all, that was poison, and Jean tells them not to worry because it's just a sleeping pill. And the boy also reveals that they were very obvious to whoever came to kill him, and he says that it would be less suspicious if they were the usual ones, but he says that it's natural for a dog to follow its owner's orders, so while the guards are on good terms with him, they end up getting hit every day and they don't even realize what's happening, and the boy is surprised that there are only 2 guards there. He says it doesn't look like there are others outside, and he notices that there is only a normal lock that doesn't even have a protection spell, and he says that he thinks they opened the 3rd warehouse for ordinary tourists. He says that this could be why the Zipful don't treat it as important, so when he is inside the place he sees a magic circle of blood and barrier, and he says that it is known by people as a security spell to discern whether someone is pure blood or not, but in fact it is a magic circle that checks whether someone is a monster or a human-like that, as if the person is infected by a plague or not, and he says that in other words it doesn't matter whose blood you put in him as long as it's a normal human. Then he cuts off that man's hand and says that he doesn't need to use his own blood and leave evidence. However, when he puts the man's blood in that circle it starts to glow, and Jean says that the first spell off barrier it was simple and now he hopes to get the relic, but that circle starts to act strangely, and he says that he used the blood of the guard he knocked out, and in fact the magic circle is still there, and it means that the owner of the blood is sick or he is not human. So he keeps asking himself what this is and activates his silent wind, and he says that he wanted to avoid using magic since it could alert someone wizard nearby, but the situation has changed, and he says that it seems like a fight is inevitable, and soon he starts to dodge the attacks of those monsters and tries to stab the animal in the box, but it continues attacking the same injured person, and Jean has no other choice besides pulling out your sword with spiritual energy. Then he notices that the mountains are able to recognize that the aura is dangerous, but when they hesitate one of them takes out that knife that Jean had stuck in his stomach, and he notices that they can even regenerate themselves, and he says that it is a fast regeneration which is normally only seen in high-rank monsters, but these 2 cannot be monsters because they were human until a minute ago. He says that there is the Zipful territory, a place where countless mages come and go and natives are oppressed, and now there is even mysterious monsters. He realizes that those 2 are living golems, and creating living golems is completely legal, and the Zipful have been using the Kalala ruins as a laboratory to experiment with forbidden magic. Jin reports that the strength and speed of a living golem is on the level of a martial artist at the beginning of the 4 stars, and their movements are imprecise compared to a trained 4-star knight, and it shouldn't be difficult to finish them off, and it is said that golem are magical weapons that can take a lot of the damage and keep going moving, but as soon as their cores are destroyed it's over for them. And he talks about the head, the heart, and the energy center, and the core is usually in one of these 3 places, and he says it shouldn't be much different with a living golem created using forbidden magic. So in this case he immediately hits the head, but notices that the golem is still alive, and in addition to its speed not decreasing, in fact it became even more violent, and he says that if it's not in the head the next place would be the energy center, but he notices it's not there, so there's only one place left, and he rips it upwards, hitting the heart, and he says he can't believe they did something like that to one brother. Then the other one attacks Jim from behind again, but the boy manages to quickly turn around and stick his sword in the chest of that golem, destroying it easily, and Jean realizes that he managed to finish it before his spell ended, and that was very close. And then he starts to hear a weak and muffled voice asking him to kill him, and when he looks at the golem that returned to a form similar to a human but very dry, and he sees that he feels very sorry and fulfills the last wish of that human being, and he says he doesn't know his situation. However, there is probably no one out there who wants to live as a golem of their own accord, and says that especially if it means that the moment he transforms you become a disposable tool with no future, and he thinks that now is not the time to get angry. An unexpected situation happened, and he even found the terrible secret of Zipful, and he also suspects that his sisters knew this when they gave him the mission. However, this does not mean that his mission suddenly disappeared. He says that even if he tells this to everyone the Zipful will simply deny it, and he says that creating living golems it is a crime so horrible that even the suspicion of it can lead to the clan being investigated by the Empire. However, he says that he will first save this evidence to continue with the mission, and even if Zipful with his power can manage to secretly intervene in the investigation, he says that this is not something he can resolve right now, and there hasn't been any movement among the bad guys yet, and it means that most of them only thought of this place as the common warehouse, and he says that they wouldn't be protecting this place so lightly if they knew that the guards were living golems, and this leads him to believe that not everyone in the Cologne ruin is involved in the use of forbidden magic, and he says that the protection spell on the stones is relatively simple, but he says that the spell in that bowl there is much more complex. He says that normally it is necessary to put a lot of effort into undoing a protection spell, but with 2 dead golems no matter what he does there the Zipful will have to cover everything, and in this he mixes that Rasengan with fire and creates 2 balls by mixing them and turning it into something even more sinister, and he says that things are going to heat up a little while he takes everything away from there. He activates the explosion in flames, and already at the Run Candle house Luna is not liking what happened at all, and she asks what her sisters was thinking about sending Jim to the Zipful territory, and asks if they are sick because he is a boy 10 years younger than them. Luna asks why they did that, so they ask if their sister really wants to know, but Luna, who they are saying that they carry the flag of their clan, are fighting for hegemony with Jin that has just entered the intermediate class, and she says that they carry flags with other flag bearers. The same goes for those who are not, and she asks if that is not an unspoken rule in this war. And the two are silent. Then Luna says that they should be ashamed because she is embarrassed that they are the flag bearer of her clan, but then anyone says that Luna was never interested in hegemony and asks what gives her the right to do that, but Luna says who wouldn't be saying that if they won after messing with Jean, but the boy successfully completed his mission in the Cologne ruins and his mother must be receiving the report now, and Luna says that now they must make sure they understand why she is embarrassed. And in the end they only helped him, and she wonders if there had ever been a case in the history of Run Kandel where a flag bearer was humiliated while trying to get rid of his younger brother, and she told them both to leave, but before they actually left, Luna remembers that from what she saw Jean is not that merciful, and from now on they must be careful. She says this truly worried, and somehow things got out of line, but they are still her little sisters, so Luna's nanny comments to her that I didn't think she would punish her sisters as soon as she got back, and she says she thought the girl was having another rebel phase, but she says she would never have a rebel phase in the city, but the nanny says she had a very extravagant adolescence and she is worried about the two girls because Jean is not the type who would forget that, and Luna asks if she also thinks that the two of them won't be a match for Jean, and she says yes. And she says that she thinks that in 5 years they won't be able to beat him, even in an official fight, and she wonders if this means they only have 5 more years to live, but Luna asks her not to say that, but while she was saying that she changes the subject and asks if the nanny took a look at what she asked for. Then she talks about Jin's murder, and the nanny says it was definitely not both. After all, they were in class intermediate at that time, so there wasn't much to go after, and Luna says she's right, and it probably wasn't Mary Iona and the other brothers, in that those who are left are Joshua Dipos Han, Vigo and Luncia, and she says that leaving the young master Han and Vigo aside, the others cannot be investigated so easily, and Luna says that this is clear. After all, the three of them have a very strong base and there is a great chance that they will have a great head on investigating them. She says that for now it will be better to just keep an eye on it because it will only cause confusion if she tries to go after it with just one reason, and the nanny says that it was a good decision of hers and says that something could have happened, assassination attempt, but Jean ended up growing up healthy so she doesn't need to worry so much, and the boy returns to Gilly Murican and she is soon happy that he is back, but he says that he is very strong and soon even she won't be able to beat him, but the girl says that that is a very dangerous place and if something had happened to him she would have given her life to avenge him, and Murican calling her strawberry shortcake, he asks her not to say something like that, and in that he asks the boy if he did the report correctly and he says yes, and he says they probably are, thinking that he is completing his missions with external help, but he doesn't care about that, and more importantly he asks them both to look at it and shows the core of a living golem, and he says that the boy is very lucky because seeing that he came back without a scratch, the golem must have been a failure, and he asks if he found that in the Cologne ruins, and he says yes, and says that 2 warehouse guards turned into monsters and attacked him, and he regenerated no matter where he cut, and it fell when he cut his hearts, and Murican is scared by this because first he was a giant from the cemetery and now a golem alive, and he asked what the Malditos Zipfel are up to, and he says that if what the boy is saying is true then this must have been something of the Zipfel, and he remembers that the ruins are in his territory, and he gets thoughtful and tells the boy to make some space in his schedule because they're both going back to Cologne, and he says he needs to ask them directly what the fuck is going on, so what boy talks, who is also hesitant to return because of the living golems but is sure it will be safe with the Murican by his side, and he even says that if he is lucky he can even use this chance to find the mana source, and no matter how much trouble they cause the Zipfel will try to cover everything anyway, so the boy says he will find time, and as soon as the mission is over Kajin and the Raz brothers return to Run Kandel alone. However, Mealy and Annie revoke their status as cadets and exile them from the clan, and Jean says that exile was a harsh punishment for cadets who technically completed their missions, but there was no one who sympathized with it, so in June 1795 Jean finally finishes his training with the Clara Stone, and Zed says that from tomorrow only the Tana brothers need to appear, and Zed tells the boy it seems that the morning training he participates in with the cadets is also no longer necessary, so next week the patriarch should say something to him, and the T brothers don't go around asking if maybe their father wants to do it. Jean is a temporary flag bearer, and they say that a provisional flag bearer means that he will have to leave the Kandel to accumulate honor to become a true flag bearer, and they say that the boy will need to act alone without the help of anyone in the clan, and the boy says that this will finally happen because now he will be able to strengthen himself as he wants without worrying about others. Then already with the patriarch Ken says that they will soon arrive at the Garden of Swords, and the patriarch says that the son he had. In his case, he continues to interfere with his training, and he says that he wanted to hide in the Black Sea for at least 10 years, but he asks how many times this has happened, and he says that he can feel that Jean has not been a normal child since Storm Castle. But he didn't think it would be like this after all. The young master's actions in the Garden of Swords were especially shocking, and the patriarch says that the boy's fighting spirit is not normal, and when he went to the Storm Castle for the first time, even though he was a year child, eyes were already full of resentment, but it seemed like the boy was trying to hide it, and he says he doesn't think he'll be able to forget how Jean provoked his brothers as soon as he arrived at the Garden of Swords without anyone teaching him. He instinctively understood how to end his opponents, and he says that his other children knew this and tried to keep Jinho under control. But look at the boy. Despite his older brothers sending him to his death, he continues to come back stronger, reaching the level of 5 stars, and he says that more than Mummet or the Cologne ruins, he thought his first mission was stranger. Somehow he won against someone from the White Wolf tribe at Manhwa, and he says that he imagined the boy would kill a white wolf using his subordinates as a shield, but he ended up killing one on his own, and he managed to prove the essence behind his principles with that action. And that can asks if the patriarch really believes that Jean killed the white wolf alone, so his father says yes, but at all the way he says that maybe the boy wasn't completely alone anyway. He's a fun boy. He must ask about the events that are happening, and so he arrives at the house with everyone greeting him, and his wife says that everyone was waiting, and he says that she must having had a lot of things to do, but she says that not so much. After all, her eldest son made all the preparations, so she didn't have to do anything. But the patriarch says that, contrary to what she said, if her grown-up children were acting appropriately, he wouldn't have had to leave the Black Sea, and he says that the guests who are going to visit the clan today are trying to please him but not his children, and Rosa says that he is right about that and asks him to come in as she made his favorite meals personally. He is looking forward to this, so he looks at Jin's waist, noticing the swords that are there, and asks Han and Vigo if they gave Jean the swords he allowed him to take, but they open the game saying that Jean took them from him because they should give him the swords if he managed to complete the mission in the Column ruins, and his father starts to laugh, encouraging the boys to try to get the swords next time. But Jim is such a smart ass, and he says that sometimes this makes him question whether he is really his son. So at night he talks to the boy asking if this would be his first banquet, and Jim starts to think that just like in his previous life he managed to experience the banquet of the other clans thanks to his master, but the first banquet in your own clan, and he says that before he had to hide during the banquets as if he were a criminal, but this time he is on the side of his father, the star of the show, so he says that he only had to die once, and his father comments to Jim, as he well knows, the clan doesn't have many banquets very often because they only do it when there is something really worth celebrating, and he says that this is how incredible the boy's achievement is, and the boy thanks his father. So the patriarch asks how many guests does he think there will be there, and he says that at least 1,000, and his father says that's practically what they told him, and there are 200 more people than the last banquet 7 years ago, and he asks if the boy knows what ISO means. He says it means that his clan's influence has grown in the last 7 years, and he says that the banquet of 1,000 people happens frequently in other clans, but each person present there is exceptional, and he says that the only thing he has done in the last 7 years is kill monsters and train in the Black Sea. But he says that the reason why his clan's influence continued to grow because he is the only Genesis Knight in the current era. In other words, if he disappeared, everyone gathered there would turn their backs on the Run Candel clan, and Jim thinks his father is right because without him the clan wouldn't be able to accumulate so much influence, and he says that together with Zipful they are called the two great clans. But as soon as his father disappears, the gap between the Zipful and Run Candel will increase drastically, and then the Zipful will rule the whole. And then he tells his father what if he hadn't been there and everyone had turned their backs on Run Candel and the clan had reached the point of no longer being able to fight against the Zipful's oppression, he would leave the clan. The kid has courage, that's what we have to admit. And his father asks what he ended up with to say. Then he says that if the clan were to fall apart due to his absence, then the cause of the fall would be the incompetence of the next patriarch, and he has no intention of dying like a dog under the command of a leader like that. And furthermore he asks how many weaknesses of them the clan has, and his father he asks what those weaknesses would be, and Jim says that in exchange for the return of Vigo's sword he made the boy show all the contracts commissioned for the clans that only the flag bearers can see, and the head of the Burn clan tricked the emperor and stole the treasury of the empire, and yet he can participate in that banquet because of the Run Candel. And the greatest artist of the Clever clan asked them to kill a Zipful mage before, and the daughter of the Herald clan sold her clan's treasure secretly because of an addiction to bets, then asked for the Run Candel to get him back. And one detail is that she still hasn't been able to pay for the order, and he says that just by looking around he managed to find several weapons that aren't swords, and he says that he's sure he has several other weapons in contract secrets that only the patriarch and his mother can see. So his father asks if he is saying that if he wasn't there he could protect the clan using these weapons, and the boy says that if a patriarch who is not a Genesis Knight were to lead Run Candel, things go depend on his negotiation negotiation skills, and the patriarch says that the boy is right, but they are not the only ones who have the weaknesses of others. The Zipfel clan must have an idea of their weaknesses just like them, so the boy says that he does not doubt that, however they have no justification for using these weaknesses, and the patriarch asks what the boy means by that. He says it's because the role of villain belongs to them. The Run Kandel, and the boy says that anyway, even with so many weapons, if the next patriarch don't use it right, he won't hesitate to turn his back and leave the clan, and says that he himself will prepare his revenge against Zipfel no matter how long it takes. And his father notices the boy talking about revenge and says that he needs to be alive to get revenge, so the plan isn't too bad. He says that the other kids don't dare to hypothesize about Run Kandel's fall in front of him. They would talk a lot of shit or regret it. But Jean calmly reveals his intentions quickly and directly, so he says that it's a shame he was born after his prime, because it's as if Luna's talent, Mari's savagery, and Deepusa's fighting spirit were all fused into one that he says is between 10 and 15 years old, and that's the time he can protect the clan as patriarch. And he says it will be fun to see if Jean can overcome the succession dynamics before his time is up, and his father invites the boy to join. After all, most of the guests it seems they have arrived, and he says one more thing. He says he has to tell something in secret after the banquet and sends the boy waits for him to call him, and Jean thinks it must be about him becoming a temporary flag bearer, and he thinks he will leave this place sometime after the banquet is over. He says that the 4-day banquet will be very long, but while he thinks someone comes shouting the Lord Patriarch, he asks what it was. Then the man says that they have crashers at the banquet, and the patriarch is surprised by this, and Jean starts thinking about crashers and suspects that they could be the Zipfel, and the man says that there are 5 of them in total, and he says that Andre Zipfel is the second in command and 4 other members of the family. So the patriarch gets very angry and tells Raisin to tell Andre to disappear and just let the rest of his family in, and tells him not to do that himself. His servants to do, and Jean thinks it's true that Andre's visit is Rod, but to dishonor Zipfel's second in command so much by sending him away. The patriarch asks if Jin thinks his treatment is too harsh, and he says no, it's refreshing, and the patriarch says that the moment Andre lets his emotions take over and leaves with his family, he will ignore the permission given by the patriarch of Run Kandel, who said that his family can enter. This is something that is not allowed in the Garden of Swords, and as he thought the Andre will follow his order, otherwise he will have to return home with 1 leg less. And he says that now it's time for the banquet to begin, and he thanks everyone for being there, saying Ser Serum, the patriarch of Run Kandel, and he says he is capable to have fun thanks to having a son so capable in his later years. And he says that first he would like to thank his youngest son Jean Run Kandel. He says that as he knows there are only 2 rules that they must follow at a Run Kandel banquet. If a fight breaks out in the middle of the banquet, those involved will be schooled by the Guardian Knights to the arena, and the loser must surrender while the winner shows mercy. After all, this is still a celebration, so Jean thinks this is a party of predestined encounters, and he says this is a meeting of thousands of people who have control over the continent, and he says that these people are interconnected in a complicated way, and he says that if what they had there was a simple normal party, they would just be passive-aggressive towards each other before returning home. But this is a banquet held in the Garden of Swords. As long as they follow the 2 rules made by their father, they cannot go as far as killing the enemy, but they can still beat him and can even obtain official supremacy as long as Soren commands them. Enjoy a banquet. Jean thinks that this clan is very crazy, and he tells Jean to enjoy it too, because if there is someone he wants to fight, he should take him, and his father says he cannot challenge someone who seems to be weaker than him unless he released him or his clan, and Jean says that he knows that, and he also knows that he can't lose no matter what. And then his father says that that's obvious, and if that happens he will take back everything, that is not only the Bradamanti but also his nanny, and the boy insists to say that he will remember this. He says that now that to think this is the first time he has talked to his father, so he says that in his past life this is something he couldn't even dream of, and he says that they just had a real very convincing conversation between father and son right now. But he says that having a father and son bond or being a kind son is not part of his plans in this life, and in this life he just wants to surpass his father, and that is the most important. Then in the midst of the banquet his brothers, they start to come close to him, congratulating the boy for reaching the 5-star level, and they ask if it's okay for them to stay a little close to the boy, and he says of course, and asks Daytona how the training with the Clara swords is going, and he says that it's getting better because they're improving a lot after they switched to the weapon that his uncle recommended, and Jean says that's good to know, and Jean talks quietly to them saying that they can leave as soon as they're satisfied with this little act. And in the middle from their conversation someone comes total king to Jean. He recognizes him as the first flag bearer of the Ken clan, and his brothers take the opportunity to leave the boy, so he starts talking to that man, saying that he heard a lot about his tales of heroism as a child. But while he talks to that man someone comes up patting Jean on the back, and he says he was wondering what kind of kid would have reached the 5-star level at 15, but he's really a kid, and says he must be at least 10 years younger than him, and sends a shout out to the boy saying his name is Hugger, and the boy doesn't like that at all, saying it's a pleasure to meet him too, but the man says he's not a very impressive boy and is making him seem it was just because he was a little rude, and he says that the boy may even be a run candle, but he is still his veteran in the world of martial arts, and he says that he is just proud of his freshman. He doesn't need to be like that. The boy tell Huger from the Tuck clan to pay close attention. Of his actions just now were an insult to everyone who has shown him respect so far in this. Everyone is very pissed off at that guy, so he says that if he wants to stay with this freshman and senior thing, he should be even more attentive, and he says that the first and second flag bearers of the Ken clan, the Knights of the Dragon King, the Black King's mercenaries, most of them are veterans of that guy, and he says that he should treat him like they treated him, so he tells Huger to accept his mistake and apologize to them and Jean. He says that since he taught him he's going to let this one pass. Then the other guy arrives saying that Huger just had his life saved by Jean. He advises Huger to follow the boy's advice, and another guy even says that he knew his big mouth would end up getting into trouble one day or another and tells him to let it go. He doesn't need to be so tense, so if they say so, he apologizes to his seniors and asks them to please forgive his freshman's mistake, and also apologizes to Jean. And then Luna arrives, saying that he has a great talent for making enemies and says that it would be nice if he could act like a normal child sometimes, and she says that he is a representative of the Run Candel clan today, and she asks Jean what he would have done if Huger had challenged. He stops a duel because he seemed to at least be in the 6 stars, and he says that if he had done that, he is sure that the patriarch and the elders of the Tuko clan would have intervened because they have been watching him for a long time, and Luna is surprised that he has even taking this into consideration while assessing the situation. If she asks if any noble taught him the secret technique for taking care of people or something like that, and he says that if there is someone who teaches that kind of thing, it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep that person next to him, and she asks if besides learning to use a sword anything else matters, and he says that it might be difficult for her to understand, but as the hated youngest of the family he needs to do a lot to survive, and she is left wondering if that is so because he is talented and brilliant, and she thinks that's why he was almost murdered in the Storm Castle, and she wonders who was that brother who noticed Jin's talent so early, and she says that anyway she's only there because it's the banquet to congratulate him, but that's not really her type, and she thinks it's time for her to do something more fun, so he asks if she's going, and she says yes, saying that he's not classy enough to be her dance partner, and says that when he grows up they will dance together and she will take him to a great place, so he says he's excited, and she says that before leaving she has to leave a message for the people just like he did, so she simply strokes his head and leaves the boy wondering, and she says that if she does this they must understand how much she values him, and people will avoid being rude to the boy because of the fear they have of her. Then she says she will see the boy later, and people start gossiping, asking if that is the white whale they know, and they even say that she must really like yours younger brother. Meanwhile, the protagonist of the betrayal anime starts to shake and starts talking to Visho, who is dying of envy because he would also like to rest his head on Miss Canvas's shoulder, and he says he has to write a poem for her today, and he's going to sing this poem all night long, and Visho gets disgusted asking if he can't shut up, and Margila tells him not to be so hard on the boy because this issue could be important for Bavard and her, say that since Bavard is dragging her around he can comfortably enjoy this party of predestined encounters, so she says that they should be more respectful towards him, and her brother doesn't like that at all, but Buvard says that is expected, but she understands him, and he says that forever he will be at their feet with pleasure. Meanwhile, Jean realizes that it's very difficult to act like a master. He keeps asking himself where are those damn zipples, and he says it's a bit annoying but he'll need to look for them in person, and in that case someone has a glass on top of his table asking if this young lady could order a drink with the rising star of the Run Candel clan. Then he realizes it's her Cirrus and Dorma from the Hidden Palace, and she says it's an honor to meet young Master Jean Run Candel, and Jean makes an exit of the master saying that it is his honor to meet the girl, and she says that he is 15 years old, the same age as her, and she asks how he managed to achieve this. He is also prized by Marshall at that age, and she says that this makes him jealous of the blessed physique of the Run Candel, and the boy says he also thinks this it is a blessing. However, the Hidden Palace is also a blessed lineage. He can't even begin to imagine how much the average Hidden Palace values her, and the girl says that the master only values her because compared to a certain someone who is not an only child, she is the master's only daughter, so she quickly takes off, hoping that wasn't rude. He says it wasn't. It's well known that he is the youngest brother among several brothers, and in fact he says that he's jealous of her. Having several brothers could be something problematic, and Jean thinks that this is strange, but he is sure that she recognized him, and he is in doubt as to why she is not talking about Mummet, and he says that there is no way she wouldn't recognize him just because he had some ashes on his face, so the girl says that she has something to ask him, and he tells her to go ahead, so she asks how his injured leg is. He realizes that she recognized him, and he says that he is fine thanks to a certain person who personally gave her medicine, and he says who doesn't even know how to return the favor, and girl says he's more shameless than she thought and asks what he was doing in the moonlit well in Mummet, and she says she thinks he deserves an explanation, so the boy asks why, and she says her subordinates couldn't find the terrorist mage in the end, and that hurt his pride a lot and made him wonder if the culprit wasn't the young boy she let go, so he says what a mage he can't be, after all he's a run candle, and asks if he really is a suspect. He says, who are sure that she knows his clan, so she says that she doesn't think he's suspicious. However, things change if they had a run candle mission that hired a mage because he couldn't complete it, and among the people who were in the inn, the only ones who could have been targeted for the run candle clan were the members of the Hidden Palace. He says that as the captain of the 7 swords of the Hidden Palace she cannot let this go, and he thinks that she is confusing things by thinking that he was after the members of the Hidden Palace, but he says that it's not completely wrong now that he hurt them while trying to kill the Carrero. But Jim tells the girl that he doesn't understand how this would be evidence against him because everything she said is a simple hypothesis, and the girl realizes that he is going to deny it until the end and says that if it is so she has a plan. She says she's going to drag him to the arena and finish him off and spit in the boy's disgusting face. So she challenges Jean Runcandel to a duel, but the boy says his father warned him not to fight someone who looks like be weaker than him, but he says that if she wants it that much he has no choice but to accept. So the Guardian Knights ask if the young master came to duel, and he says yes and tells him to leave, leaving only the doctors, and also asks him for 2 decent swords. So they say they're going to cellar the arena until they're done, and Jim thinks spectator battle freaks are going to start showing up after midnight, and she's the daughter of the master of the Hidden Palace and it would be very cruel to finish her off at the front from everyone. So she tells Jean, telling him to make a promise before they start, and the boy asks what happened, and she says that if he wins he will have to tell everything that happened in Mammoth that day without lies. So the boy accepts. He says that on the other hand if he wins they will pretend that they never met that day. So the girl realizes that he's hiding something, so she tells him to go inside face and stops her attack that he almost hits, and he talks about the unique ability of the End Dorma lineage, the myriad ice blades, and then Jean says that he didn't think she would use her secret technique right away and starts teasing the girl, saying that as he is younger he still has to learn the secret techniques of his clan, and he asks her what he should do, and she simply says that it is not her problem going after the boy with a lot of leaves, and she thinks about him saying that he really is a 5 stars, and she says, which seems like he is barely blocking her attacks, but as they exchange golfs his true abilities are coming to the surface, but it's no use. The difference of a star can be easily filled by using the 3rd form of the myriads of ice blade, and she says that since she is weaker and has less energy she can't prolong this, and when he counterattacks after reading her attack pattern she will switch and finish him, and Jean thinks that Cirrus is still a 4-star knight, and even if she can use the ice blade she will fall behind in attack and defense, and after realizing the difference between them he is sure that she is preparing something to change the rhythm of the fight, and he bets that she will use her secret technique, but he has no way of estimating how much powerful are the ice blades. Then the two clash their last attack. He says that in this case he will have to respond using his own secret technique, and he says that among the dozens of techniques he read in the Storm Castle, the strongest among the several secret techniques that he got it. However, as he prepares to attack Cirrus he starts to laugh and says that it's over for Jin, going at him with everything with his ice blades in the 3rd avalanche form, then attacks the boy, and he realizes that he has a condensed aura in the fragments of ice, and beings in turn appear inside a whirlpool with a blade of ice around him, looking at him in the most badass way she could manage. She looks at me like that I ask forgiveness even for what I didn't do. Then the boy realizes that things they are getting serious, and she laughs, and this destabilizes Cirrus because she has already performed her avalanche, and even a genius who reached 5 stars at the age of 15 shouldn't be able to break the secret technique of the Hidden Palace. But even so she is very restless, wondering because, and when she notices Jin's sword is already in the girl's face and she barely has time to dodge it, and when the sword was next to the girl's face Jean realizes that she is going to explode and screams for beings, and after this big explosion Jean think you should have used another technique without the blade storm of the Attila clan, because he says that that attack was too destructive for someone at the 4-star stage to handle. So he says that if she couldn't dodge it she must be dead or crippled, but when he finds Cirrus she has her head down, thinking that soon she, of all people, because she was afraid of dying, swerved to avoid getting hurt, and she starts to wonder if she really did that. So he asks if she's okay because he almost killed her. He says it was bad, and he thinks that even after warning her she tried not to dodge the storm of blades. He says that no matter how important honor and pride are, Iris is still just a 15-year-old child, and she is too young to suppress her desire for survival. So he says that if he were in her place he would have dodged too, and he bets that she would have also warned him to dodge, so he won't say anything else, and he thinks that this won't be enough to console her. But and the girl takes out the ointment from inside of your hobby and says that he has a wound on his face, and she applies ointment, saying that she will consider it as payment for saving his life, and Jim asks if she isn't valuing the life of the only successor of the Hidden Palace too little, but the girl says that's because it is a life to be pitied, but she says she's going to start appreciating it more again and tells him not to worry about it, and she says that from now on they're two people who just met, and says she'll see the boy tomorrow and the only thing Jim can do is look stupid. Back in the next day he says that there are fewer people than yesterday, and he thinks that perhaps today is the real beginning of the Feast of Predestined Encounters, since now he will be able to watch the duels. He says that since since there are fewer people in the hall he finally manages to see those damn Zipfuls. He says that he heard that all the guests from the Zipful clan were between 15 and 20 years old, and he says that this is perfect since they are of similar ages and it will be good to be able to compare their level of magic. And he also says that there are things that I would like to ask about Cologne, but it seems like a bad idea, and he says it's okay because he will have a lot of free time once he becomes a temporary flag bearer, and he thinks he can just investigate the column ruins with Murikan later, and he says that with his help will make it easier to find the source of mana. And the boy says that those damn Zipful won't have the chance to produce magic en masse this time, and while he thinks he can prevent something terrible from happening, he Murikan him right there and the dragon is gone. Having fun with beings, she asks, where is his master? Meanwhile, Jean is really squeezing his fist and they notice that the name of that cat is Nabi Nabi Run Candle, and she asks Jean if he was the one who named it, and the boy says yes, possessed out of anger. Then someone else recognizes that cat and says that they knew they would find Jean if they followed that cat. Then he says that they finally met again and says that the boy has no idea how long he spent looking for him. So Jean asks who could that be? Say this is a disappointing thing to say because how could he have forgotten him? He has been thinking about the boy every day, and if he keeps wondering what is going on, and he says he will give him a hint telling him to try and guess, and says his name starts with B. While he starts going crazy if they say it's a weird sound taking the Nabi out, and the boy asks if that tip helped, but Jim says no. So the boy says he's going to give a second tip and says they met through first time in the transfer portal from the Honey Kingdom, and Jim says he's not and remembers this. Then the boy says that Jay then has a surprisingly bad memory and tells him to listen carefully saying his name, but Jay doesn't let him determine the sentence, calling the boy Baradin Zepful, which he says he was being very obvious when he pretended he didn't know him. He asks why he couldn't notice and why he keeps bothering him, and the boy only realizes this now while making a dumb face, and Jean is completely surprised that this goofy is really going to become a 9-star mage 30 years old. He wonders how he will be appointed as the future patriarch of the Zipful clan, and the boy says that anyway he was looking for him a lot since yesterday and he looked for him for 2 hours today but couldn't find him. But Jean asks how after all the banquet hall isn't that big and how he couldn't find it for 2 hours, and the boy says that he would have found it if he could use magic, but this is banned since this is the territory of Run Candle. And Jean, do you think he is or is he lying or he has orientation problems? But the boy says that anyway it's good to see him because it's been 5 years, and he is surprised that the boy has reached the 5-star stage of magic, and he says that he knew he would achieve great things. But Baradin, he says he wasn't joking either. After all, his magic is already at the 6-star stage, and Jean is surprised by this. The boy says that they are a whole stage above his swordsmanship, but Jean is wondering how this is possible because Baradin Zipful, the most talented, is only at the 6-star stage at 18 years old, and Jim says that if it were him he thinks he would have reached at least the 7-star stage, and he wonders if Edge would be talking about the lowest stage on purpose. And Baradin starts to boast saying that playing for his face it was worth looking for him because he was waiting for the day they will fight, and tells Jim to go after him. And the boy realizes that he is not lying about his skills after all, he is bragging a lot. He says whatever the case, if Baradin is only in the 6 stars at 18 years old after that Zipful heir, the current patriarch Jean will be the next person to reach the peak of magic. He is sure of that. This was a good chance to objectively look at his dormant talent, and Jean tells I told him before, but he needs to learn to shut his mouth and save his words, and the boy says he's saying the same thing as his father. Jean is sure everyone would say the same and says anyway. He asks why that the Zipful came to the banquet without an official invitation, and he says it was because of him. After all, he begged his uncle so he could meet him, and Jim thinks that's strange after all their second in command entered enemy territory because of a child's tantrum. Then the boy says he heard about the banquet when he was passing by Hofer, so he thought it was destiny, and Jean asks if that was all, and he confirms that it was, and Jean says that he should be grateful that this is a Kate and he should behave while he is there. However, Baradin asks if he isn't being very indifferent towards him, and he says that he knows that Jin's father was very merciful towards his uncle, and he says that since they are on this subject he will make him a promise, and he says that even if the boy go to a Zipful banquet without being invited he won't hurt you, and Jean asks if this is serious even if he attack them. So Baradin says he always keeps his word, and he says even if Jean does that he won't kill him, and even if a fight happens he won't participate, and the boy says that this is nonsense as he walks away, and Baradin asks where he is going. He says that there is a weirdo he has been staring at non-stop for a while now, and then he talks to the guy who comes directly out of Netherare and asks if there is something he would like to tell him. So the Buvard talks to the boy asking when Luna will return, and Jean is in disbelief with that, so he asks again when Luna will return because he wanted to give that to her, and he shows a notebook with his photo along with hers and several little hearts. He says it's a collection of poems he wrote during the night and it's filled with his love. He says he's sure Luna will understand when they both read it, and he says she'll notice he's a better man than seems to be. He also says that maybe in the near future he can call Jim his brother-in-law, and that Baradin spits wine. Jean gets very angry and starts to get irritated, telling the guest that he thinks he needs needs to be beaten a little, and Jean says that he not only used to mention his sister's name as well as dared to call him brother-in-law, and he says that he must really underestimate Krun Kandel and orders them to bring that man to the arena, and then the knights start to pull him and the Buvard goes back to calling the boy brother-in-law, asking why that he is doing this, and he says that all he did was express his love and everyone should have the right to express their love. Jim, get this guy away from your sister, you don't know how much Dojin this guy this appeared, then he is the protagonist of a very wrong manga, and Buvard shouts again asking how Jean can do this to him who is a guest. He asks how he can treat a guest like that, and he says that all he did was call his sister beautiful, so Jean says the duel will be unarmed combat after all. He really wants to need that meat. And after Jean takes Bavard to the arena, he even tries to talk, but Jean tells him to shut up, punching him in the face. He says he doesn't want to know, and Buvard tries to counterattack, and Jean realizes that it's an aura and that he's almost around 6 stars, and if they realize that Jean chose someone much stronger than him, and she says that it looks like that guy's specialty is soft arts, and Baradin compacted, saying that it will be a complete humiliation if he fails. Then Buvard manages to get it right, the boy asking how dare he touch him with such a low skill level. While he was going to continue, Latino Jean puts his hand in his face and takes him back, and Rains punches on his face, and Baradin starts saying that it's over. After all, Jean made a quick counterattack after making him lower his guard and says that it was as expected of him. Then Margila starts saying that she can't understand young Master Jin's actions. After all, the result has already been decided, and she asks why step on someone who has already lost their will to fight, and she wonders why he is acting unforgiving like that, and she says that Jean overreacted against someone weaker than him, and she asks if as friends on the boulevard they should stand by and watch this continue. But seeing what I say, that guy is not weaker than Jean, but she keeps saying that she is disappointed in her brother and tells him to go there and teach Jean a lesson, and she tells him to do it through a more honorable method than what Jean used. So the guy asks if she's telling him to fight Jean, then everyone starts making fun of him, saying that the girl is brave and telling him to accept his sister's request, and he ends up following her order by calling Jean, asking how about he leaves this guy and fights with he and Jean start to analyze Visho. After all, he will fighting against someone with 7 stars. He says it doesn't matter, the result is something good for him, and he says that just being able to experience the swordplay of the Evlianos will be a great lesson for him, and he says that the previous boss of the Klin Villian was a powerful guy that even his father recognized. However, he talks about Margila and says that she is a funny lady. After all, she is watching the fight and putting her brother in a very difficult situation, and Jean says that it seems like he cares a lot about his sister, and seeing what I say, you're talking obviously. So Jim says that as someone who also has a sister, he completely understands her feelings, and he says that he also cares a lot about his sister, and that's why he hopes that they can control the mouths of their subordinates in the future. So I say that it looks like he misunderstood something. The guy he just beat up is not his servant but an assistant, and he asks him if Gaston's Buvard harmed him in any way, and Jean is scared by that name, which I say continues saying that Buvard, he is only there to help his sister who has difficulty getting around. He says that he is a craftsman who doesn't fit in at the banquet. While Mistletoe continues talking, he starts thinking about Gaston's Burvad craftsman, and he only realizes now that he was the transformer, and he asks what relationship Buvard and I have. He says that there was no record of connections between Buvard and the Eviliano clan when he was captured in his previous life, and he wonders if I know that Bavard is the transformer, and he says he has each more and more questions after he found him, and he says he can't be distracted. After all, his opponent is a 7-star knight, and in that vein he says he will be under his care, and Jean thinks he will focus on the battle, and with that VK goes after him. Jay can feel from the first blow that this strength is not that of a 7-star knight. He says that this is a swordsmanship that has a depth equivalent to that of his uncle Zed. He says that this sword movement is something he cannot understand at your level current, and everyone notices that Jean is being pressured from the beginning, but they say that it is already impressive that he is enduring so much. So they say that the Evlian swordsmanship is famous for being complex and alive, and also saying that the people who experienced this swordsmanship never wanted to fight against the 4 again. Liano again, and Began thinks that no one seems to know, but those from Clan Hun Kandel shine even brighter in situations like this, and he says that if Ziviliano is a snake, Stoda Run Kandel's sword is like a rhino moving forward. He says that although his horn can break the head but cannot be stopped. So Jean starts to get more and more choked up, and he says that it's clear that Visho is going easy on him, but he also says that it's true that despite him having someone's skill of 5 stars, he is fighting well against someone who is above 7 stars. He says that although he is reaching his limit, he can start to feel it again, so he remembers when he fought against that guy who ripped his arm off. He says that this is the same action as that time, and he feels like his sword is on fire, and Eviliano says it was a good fight and goes after after the boy, but Jin remains still until the last second, and when his sword starts to crack it is broken and the blow continues going towards above Jin's neck, but before he gets hit he falls to the side, but he manages to cut his neck. He is left wondering what the fuck was that. In the end, after all, the moment Jin's sword broke he felt something sharp on his neck. He says it like a stick. He reached the Mind Blade realm while fighting him, and he says that if Jin had reacted a second earlier and he had reacted a tenth of a second later, his head would have been cut off. While they take the boy away, he starts to think that Jin is a very scary guy. So a few days later, Murakin is sleeping on Maluko's face and he has the cat away, and he is surprised to be in his room and thinks he passed out after the fight with Vassal. So Gile runs to him and he asks why, how long did he sleep, and she says he slept for 2 days, and the boy realizes that the banquet is over and he hasn't even managed to greet the guests who came to see him, and she thinks that he doesn't need to think like that because in the last 2 days the fight between him and Visho has been the talk of the moment, and she says that this in itself is enough recognition, and she says that it was all because of him showing the realm of the Mind Blade at the end, and he says that the fact that he can do that at the end of a fight against the 8-star knight is incredible, so he thinks it's not a kingdom of blade of the perfect mind, but he still got what he wanted. He says that the days he trained with Luna are finally paying off. He says that at first he couldn't understand the training and he is impressed that she helped him even though he is at a level where this S activates in extreme situations. He does not need to be impatient, and it is incredible that he managed to fight against an 8-star knight although barely. And in addition he says that he gained several things with this banquet. He confirmed the status from Baradin. He got something from a friendship with the heiress of the Hidden Palace and discovered that Buvard Gaston and Visho that Ivilieno are known, so he says that there are several possibilities behind the crime of transformation and it is not something he needs to solve now, so he says who must get more information first. He sees the flowers that Gil is taking care of and asks who it belongs to, and she says that the heiress of the Hidden Palace left them and asks if the girl likes him, but he says no because it is a tale of palace. The hidden meaning behind the flower is a never-ending fight. She says it looks like she wants to fight him again, and Murakin says it doesn't matter and asks if it's the first time off him getting flowers from a girl. He says that although it is a challenge it is still monumental, and he asks if the strawberry pie doesn't agree with him, but she leaves the cat in the void saying that the patriarch ordered him to go as soon as he wakes up, and she says that thinks it's time for him to prove himself and he's excited about it, but it seems like he's going to be away from his family for a long time, so he asks where his father is and goes to meet him, and when he arrives his father soon notices and the boy is apprehensive, and his father says that it's been a while since one of his children has seen him with casual clothes, and the patriarch notices that it looks like Jean noticed that he's going to have to live far away. He says yes because he's planning to leave soon, so his father gets scared by this and Jean realizes that he liked that, and he says he's not sure why, but after he returned it became very easy to read his father that the patriarch asks him if he knows where they are. Then he says that it is the mausoleum, a place where people who have made great family achievements are allowed to enter through the Garden of Swords, and where their heroes who have achieved greatness and are buried, and the patriarch thinks it's great that he knows that, and he says that in other words the heroes of the family, and he says that that place is for those who protected it for thousands of years, and he asks if he knows about the first patriarch Timar Run Kandel and him. He says that he's not buried there, and Jim also says that he knows there are no tombstones for him anywhere in the Garden of Swords. He says that the dark power that Jean has is the reason they can't honor him, and his father says that right when he died they made a humiliating pact they could never use magic again and honor the ancestors who used it, and he says that the resulting consequences were that the gods of Zipful came together and placed a curse on Run Kandel's blood, and he says that because of that all born after the first patriarch have a body that cannot use magic, and the patriarch says that when he defeated the brothers he surfaced with his aura. He didn't ask how he obtained that power. He asks if the boy remembers that. He says yes, he even lied saying that he would use it for the good of the family, but his father says that it is a relief that he was young before because if it happened now he wouldn't let it go, and he asks Jim has he heard Sodert's voice before, and the boy says yes because he told him calls him a contractor. He says despite this he didn't hear his voice in this life, and the patriarch says that it must be unfair for his brothers, but the patriarch asks if he can use that power to overcome them and dominate the family, and Jim says he's going to go out and see the world, and he says that if there is nothing more worthy of mastering than Run Kandel he will do it. So his father and looks at him smiling and says that to be recognized the others left the Garden of the Sword, but he will be going and find an aspect of family to recognize, and he says he doesn't know if should he be proud of this or say that the boy is arrogant. He says he will give him 5 years, and in that time he should be recognized or recognize the family and come back with his answer, and in that Jim swears on his sword thanking everything they did and says who will meet him in 5 years. So the boy leaves, and Gil asks if he finished the conversation well with his father, and he says yes, that all he needs to do now is, and then he notices that Gil is a little different. He sees something on her wrist and she says it's a device to block her aura so she can't use it, and she says she knows this because she's heard it from the older nannies, and she says it's a little strange to suddenly not be able to use her power. She says being a nanny instead of build your own reputation it is based on what your master becomes, so he shouldn't make a face like that. Because this is for him, and he says only for these next 5 years, but he will continue protecting Guile forever, so he apologizes. She tells him, and he doesn't say that because that's enough. She can be his reserve driver. She will be able to regain her power after Jean finishes his test, and he looks back thinking that it will be 5 years. He says that it seems like this is the beginning, and they leave from their everything to see the world, and the patriarch still at home is thinking that although he reached the demigod realm with just a sword, he was unable to break the oath that his ancestors made with Zipfel. However, Jim made a contract with Soderette and has his spiritual energy, and Jim may be the only hope, and he asks if that boy will be able to obtain the power to free the clan. He says that he has hope for that. Gilly. He talks to Jean asking if he is really going to leave without saying goodbye, and she says that not only the cadets but Luna will also be a little upset, and he tells her not to worry because she has a free spirit, and as for the cadets it's kind of shameful, and he says it's not like they're going to die. If he said he was leaving they'd probably do a sword ceremony at the gate or something like that. Realizes that it really is something they would do, so she asks where they are going. She says that she heard that the other flag bearers went to Mummet as their first destination, and she says it is because it is better there to capture villains and build reputation, but he thinks in reputation and says that the provisional flag bearers of the clan, before becoming a flag bearer, need to go out into the world and build a reputation in relation to their martial prowess to be recognized as flag bearers, and in the process they do not. They can expect no help from the clan. He says that, for example, Mary, she massacred strong people in the south, and he says that just by gaining the pseudonym Mary the Stormwind for being the crazy woman of the so, she became the flag bearer, and he says that all others took between 6 months and years before returning, and he says that his father still gave him 5 years, and there is only one reason for that. He wants him to reach the peak of his spiritual energy before returning. He calls Gilly to go to the Aquan Kingdom, and she says that here would be a part of Luther's magical federation, and she says that that is Zipfel territory. She asks why of all places. He says that when he went there on a mission to the Cologne ruins he heard that several magi are registered were causing havoc there, and they seem to be tormenting people by forming alliances with expendables. E.g. says that this is a great idea. She loved catching bad guys in her prime, and says that she is getting excited just imagining it, but Jim says that actually he has never heard anyone say that this is information he obtained in his past life, and all the unregistered mages and mercenaries in that place are subordinates of a black clan called the Tezen clan. He says that their real objective is the underground auction that they hold. He says that it must be full of items of unknown real value, and says that among them there are some Tomas Os Magicos and the ring that he needs to buy. So Gil tells him that they cannot use the transfer gate for Reina Kim. After all, according to the rules from the clan, they could only leave with 10 gold coins, and she says that since he can't reveal that he is a run Candel to receive external support, and she says that things are going to get difficult, but he says that they will solve it by going to the Zon Kingdom, and she asks how he plans to get there, and Jean says they can fly. In this he asks what MONARCH's doing it by telling him to transform, so he asks if he can, but he tries to stop it by asking what will happen if someone recognizes him, and he says okay, it's okay, besides he needs to free himself from time to time, but she's still afraid of the clan. Then the MONARCH transforms, revealing his true gigantic form, and tells everyone to hold on tight. They'll have to fly for a whole day to get to the kingdom. Zon and this Luna, who was walking calmly, feels that presence and looks outside, seeing the dragon flying. She realizes that that is Jean. He says that he is flying on a dragon. Soon after they become a temporary flag bearer. She stays incredulous at this, but says he is a bold boy and wishes luck to his heartless little brother who left without even saying goodbye to his sister. And already in the kingdom, Zon MONARCH asks if the strawberry pie is okay. After all, she is a little sick. He starts to get angry with the boy. After all, the strawberry pie, she was scared because of him, but he asks why it's his fault. After all, it's his fault for flying weird, but MONARCH says it was the boy who wanted to fly, so he goes back to help her, and Jean starts making fun of him, saying he's a great black dragon having weird movements like that, so he lays her down saying it won't work and he will stay to take care of her, telling the boy to go get the money. So he tells the MONARCH to stay there and not invent fashion, and in this case he arrives being from the capital of the kingdom, Zon, in the big clan Bill mansion, and a boy was thinking about Jim at that moment. After all, there was a banquet for him, but he only found out after it was over, and he says that it may have been a request, but still the boy is his savior, and says that I wanted to find him again, and he wonders when he will be able to find him and repay what he owes. Then Jean arrives talking to Sember and then puts his hand on the boy's mouth so he doesn't scream, and tells him to calm down. After all, it's Jean who saved him from the group 15. Then he wonders how Jean got there, and he says that the boy told him to look if he needed help, so he says yes, he remembers, and how could he forget that, because if it wasn't for Jean, who knows what would have happened to him. So the boy says, which is great. He goes to wait there, telling the boy to get some money and valuable things, and the boy gets wide-eyed seeing this, asking how is it. Jim says that the rule says he needs to hide that he is a provisional flag bearer because he needs to improve their reputation with just their martial stuff and without the help of the clan, so it was natural that the young Run Candel would be extremely poor more in the first and second month, as they were only taught how to pack and until they managed to collect the reward of a wanted criminal or gather money from the mercenary they were forced to experience poverty. But things were totally different for him, and he says that the food in the Zon kingdom isn't that bad, and she says that she was prepared to starve for a few days like that like the other flag bearers, but it was a great start thanks to him. And Murican starts are saying that yesterday she was talking to Jean asking if that wasn't distortion, and he says that she had a great change of reaction but she doesn't know what to talk, and Jean talks, which is not extortion. Saber can pay off his debt by giving him money, and Jean remembers the boy giving him a huge bag of gold, and Jean talks to Murican asking if he is sure he didn't eat too much. After all, the dragon has a belly-off beer. He says that they are going to the transfer gate and asks what he will do if he vomits again, but the dragon tells him to shut up. After all, eating until he is full is the best thing in the life of a predator like him. But Jean says that he's not a predator at all. After all, he would go hungry if it weren't for him, and the dragon says that if he doesn't want to see him vomit, just get a ride with him, and he asks why he insists on using the transfer gate. Jim starts saying that she herself can't handle being sick of him movement, and he apologizes with his strawberry pie, and Jean says he's worried about the ice cream, but the problem is something else. After all, the place where they're going is the Aquan Kingdom, and he says they are members of the Magical Federation in Morning controlled by the Zipful clan, and around 80% of active dragons are inside of Zipful, so flying on his back without permission is basically a declaration of war. That Murican says that more than half of those cowardly dragons would run away just hearing his name, and he says that for Monty those suckers are showing their wings around the world. Really, it has become a good place to live, and Jim says that he already warned Murican not to transform into nothing on the streets. Then he also says that the Zipful clan is now maintained by dragons, and he says that the gods who created those dragons and the Zipful who they formed a contract with these gods, and he says that on the other hand Clanran Candle only has him as a contractor, and he says that if his father hadn't been there they would have finished with Candle Rum a long time ago. But he notices that something is wrong, because stopping to think how they have gathered so many contractors, and he wonders if it is possible to bring together so many in a single generation. He says that this is far from being a mere coincidence, so they ask for Jin's identity, and he realizes that he ended up thinking too much and they have already arrived. He says that he is Jean Grey and that is Gile Pi 10, and says that they are going to the Aquam Kingdom for tourism, and then they let them enter the place and they say that teleportation to the kingdom here will soon begin, and Gilly says that as expected from a clan identity they managed to get in without any problems, and the boy says it's clear. After all, they said it was so well made that it could even fool Vermont's special forces. He was in your past life. But now it's been 15 years, so they arrive in the kingdom, and the boy soon starts saying that before returning he spent the last year of his life in the capital of the kingdom, and he says that there would be some good years in the future, but the scenario hasn't changed much, and the street vendors and beggars can be seen everywhere, and the people on the streets have dark expressions, and it says that it is a strangely dark city. It's such a beautiful day, but Jean thinks that everything is because of the tyranny of those bastards Tessin, and he says he remembers hearing about how bad it was during that period. He tells them to find an inn first, and then they go hunting for prey, and when he arrives at the place Murican asks if he's sure they'll stay in such a bad place, and he says who is sure that his young master has a plan in mind, but the Murican says that they are full of money, they don't need to stay in a place like this. But Jim says that he is sure that things will be very good if they keep trying to make money, but it will be different. In this life he is the one who will use Jet this time while being beaten like a convict. He says that if he continues he won't stay still. He may not look like it, but he is a 5-star, but Murican asks what he has to do with this, so Jet tells him that it was bad and no, it was poison. It was a sleeping pill, but that doesn't improve anything, and he continues to fuss, and Jim thinks that this must be enough and calls Murican saying that they will listen to him, but Murican asks if he is trying to talk to the guy who tried to drug them, so the Jet asks to he saves you, he will do anything to make up for his sins, and the Murican tells him to shut up and not speak until he dies, and Jean says he will ask a simple question and Jet will die if he lies, so he tells him to tell the truth and he will be played by humor, criteria, and instinct, and asks if he understood. He answers yes. Then Jim asks who he is, and he says he is Jet, the owner of this inn and an informant, but the boy seems to want to know more, so Jim says he scams people and does human trafficking. Then the Murican he starts to get angry, and Jim asks to be spared because he can be useful to Jean. He says he knows Kim like the back of his hand. He swears that, and Jean asks if he wanted to drug him and sell him, so he says that's it and apologizes again, and the boy asks where they would sell it to while he steps on and breaks Jet's hand. He starts crying saying that they would sell it to the Tessin underground auction, so the boy tells him to be more detailed, and he continues saying that it is an auction operated by a shadowy organization called Tessin. They sell sell everything: slaves, drugs, stolen smuggled goods and artifacts. So Jim is happy that he found the Tezen auction, so he says everything is fine and says he will heal Jet until dinner and asks if he knows what he is going to do after. So Jet soon thanks him for his mercy and Murikan asks if the boy is going to waste money healing that shit, and Geely says he's right because if he lets him continue living he might try to trick him again. And Jim talks about the underground auction of the shadowy organization, asked if there is a better opportunity than dismantling a place like that, and he says that it won't be too late to get rid of it later. But Geely still stands back and tells him to trust him because they need one guide anyway, and he says he's going to come back and find someone to cure him. So they both find this very strange, and once outside Jean says it's tiring to pretend he doesn't know everything, but he says he has no choice since he doesn't intend to tell anyone that he is a regressor, and the doctor says that it would be better for him to rest until he is completely cured, and he tells them to call him if they need anything. And Jim is amazed because, as expected from the Magical Federation of Lotero, even the healer found on the streets is very skilled, and Jet starts cursing them because first they beat him and then they heal him. He asks who those guys are and he thinks Jean would be a descendant of a big martial family or maybe even Vermin Special Forces, but he knows that whoever it is, if he betrays them he will turn to dust. So Jean tells them to go there. He says they need to go to the underground auction. Then at the entrance Jet arrives with 3 more suspicious people and they ask why Jet brought a crowd with him, and he asks if they are products, but he tells you to be careful with your words and open the gates because they are your guests. So they do that, and from inside they come a musical feast. So the Murikan says they are very funny, well to an operated place by rubbish. The atmosphere is good, and I can tell you from up here the head of Tezen is a man known as Sala, but there is still someone above him, and he tells them to get masks because it's better for them to hide their faces while they are at the auction. Jim asks who is the real boss, and he tells you that he is someone called Alu or Spider-Man, and he says that this place was decorated his way to hide the fact that he is a gangster with no manners. And he says that Alu is different from a little pawn like him. He not only has the ability to control the dirty streets as well as 7-star martial artist, and he already tells you that according to rumors he even has a connection with pureblood Rum Candel who live on the other side of the ocean. And Jean soon becomes interested in this gossip about his family, but Murikan tells him to ignore it, asking him if he really thinks those guys are the type to hang out with rotten trash from a small town. And Geely agrees with that because despite everything she doesn't think there's anyone that foolish in the clan, but the boy says no because there's a person he cursed so that he couldn't wield swords. He says that if there's anyone connected to the Federation it's that person, and he talks about the laminated illusion, a 9-star curse that prevents you from using swords, and he says that despite thinking there's an evil that can konar such a strong curse would last 10 years in the Castle of the Storm and 5 years in the Garden of the Sword. This is the only thing he can discover in these years, and he needs to try to find out, but whatever the cost. And he says that they came to that place with the intention of turning the place inside out, and he thinks it will be worth it to confirm Hello's identity. Murikan asks what the plan is and asks if it would be to get rid of all the gangsters on the first day here, and G says that the guards he saw recently on the way, they seem to be very skilled. He says that there are also some people who appear to be unregistered mages, and she thinks they started a fight in the middle of enemy territory. It's not a wise idea, and he tells them not to worry, after all he has a plan, and she questions what plan would that be, and he whispers in both of their ears. Then Murikan says that sometimes he wonders what's going on in his mind and asks how he comes up with an idea like that, and he says that it's a bit shocking. He asks if he can really do it like that, a run Candel, and he tells them not to worry, and if something happens to them they just need to run. And then the Jet says it's that way and says he purposely put them in a secret place and tells them to be welcome at the Flower of Tezen underground auction, and the presenter says that he will bring a new product and says that it doesn't matter where I look they came or why they are there, and the first product are things that he can use whenever and however he wants, and there are slaves, so he says they are in good condition, and note a guy in the background because it looks like it can be used for different jobs. And Jean asks if Jet wanted to sell them, so he says it was very foolish, and Jean thinks about the slaves because he must be happy and at least they are not children. So Murikan asks Jim what they do now. He simply tells him to wait because he heard that there are useful items in that auction, and he says that if anything worth comes up he will get it for him, and he says that from then on they will start to get along. Move, and he thinks about the ring artifact, and if he is right in his information it must be rotting in their shed now. He can get it after executing his plan. Then they announce that now the auction will start for real, and Jim says that they should just be patient and wait. And a week later Jet tells Jin that he spent a whole week just looking at the products, and if he doesn't buy anything that day the Tezen are probably going to start bothering him. So Jim asks if it's not his job to do something about it, and he says yes, telling the boy to act however he wants. So he thinks he can do nothing. If he continues like this he'll be expelled regardless of who he is, so he tells the boy to buy some shit before they put him on his knee. One more thing appears, he says, which is the first magical tome of the day, and it says that it is the magical tome of Manhwa, the wizard who once ruled the world, and he says that they cannot decrypt what is in it, but for sure there is great magic stored, and they start with 80 as a bid, and Jean thinks that it's not Mat though the Onak but Metho also MONARCH calling him idiots. He says that all Tomas de MONARCH are evil, so it's impossible for this to be true, and he says it hasn't even been a week since the auction it started in the schism and they are already doing something like these. The presenter constantly says nonsense, so he talks about the next product while Jean says that these stupid wizards tend to fall for these things, and the presenter says that the author of the next wizard is Tessum, and he says that bidding should start with 50 coins of gold. So Jean thinks there are some Tomas like that. They are not famous, but they are like a newly bought lottery ticket. So Murakami touches the boy saying that he needs to buy this because if it is from Tizen that he knows it is a good deal, then Jean raise your sign offering 150 coins, and they ask if it has a higher value, and everyone gets scared asking if the boy is from some very rich family. He says that a magical tome recommended by a dragon, it must be good, so it is sold to him. He says there is no reason to ask why then the next magical tome was made by Shug Hister. This certainly opens the boy's eyes, but other people don't recognize who Hister is, so they say that first Tizen, and now this is just the unknown items coming, but the boy in turn offers 200 gold coins, and everyone gets restless asking who this guy is and why he's just buying strange things. So Murakami asks if the boy knows that tome so he can start offering 200, and the boy says he thought it would be good to buy one more, but he thinks he never thought he would find this thing there. His master's clan, the person who taught him everything in his past life. Hister, he says he heard that her clan collapsed hundreds of years ago, and Jim never imagined he would find something like that there, so yes, sold to the boy, and says that he should give this to her as a gift when they meet again, and the boy says that's all for now and they're going to move. Then Murakami starts reading that and says that it's really from Tizen that he was thinking about, but he asks what's in it because it's a very strange and complicated crackle, and Jean thinks it's clear because the only ones who can understand what's written are him and his master, and Jet is happy that he actually bought something because it would be very bad if he hadn't bought nothing again today. So the boy talks to Jet saying he is going to meet Lou the Spider Hand. Then he asks what he is doing after all this is not possible, even if he is a customer. Hello should be unreachable, but the boy tells him to talk to him and says that Baradin Zipfel wants to see him, and when Jet hears that name his heart almost comes out of his mouth. He starts running cursing everything, and he concludes that the boy is not from Vermin's special forces but a Zipfel of pure blood, and he says this is great, and if he gets Zipfel's good graces he'll be able to get out of there. So he breaks down the door telling Alu to go talk to him, saying that Bud and Zipfel is looking for the guy. He says that this is a good thing, but inside nobody likes his approach. Everyone looks dirty at the crazy guy, but then after someone goes to meet Jean asking if he is the bad guy and tells him to follow him because the boss wants him to see, but the boy punches that security guard in the face and says he has to be joking, and he summons a very threatening fireball in his hand asking if he is Alu, and the man says no, and he says that the boss wants him to escort them to his office, but the boy continues with the fireball and on top of him saying that revealed his name, and yet he is treated like that, and he leaves a message telling Lou to go there himself, crawling on all fours to his feet. So Lou really goes to the boy's feet saying that he is the one who takes care of the house. Tezen, he says, that failed to recognize him, who resides in the sky above from this land. He asks for forgiveness, and he starts to think that if someone had said be Baradin Zipo he would have laughed, but the boy is different. His aura is different, and he also has that fireball that he used earlier, and he says that it was at least at the 5-star mana level, and to be able to use 5-star mana Ness City would be difficult for anyone other than a Zibble. And a week ago Jean says he's going to pretend to be Baradin, and he says that even if Alu knows someone related to the Zibble would just be a mere servant, and it means he can't prove that he isn't Baradin. But Jim thinks the problem isn't he would be exposed or not if the family discovers this in the future, or even Patriarch. She doesn't know what could happen. So Jean tells him to get up, and the guy soon obeys Jean. He tells him to take a look at it. He asks what he thinks it is. Then Lou says that they are magical tomes. He apologizes because he asked for old magical tomes without Zipfel's permission, so he says that the 2 tomes are brought there are a lot valued by his family. He asks how much money he made that way. Then Lou begins to despair, asking for forgiveness because he is a martial artist. He was stupid enough not to recognize the value of the books. It ended up bothering him, and he says he will do his best to recover them, so he asks for a chance. So the boy asks if he doesn't think it would be better for him to recover them himself instead of leaving it to people like them, and then he tells Alu to shut up and give him the accounting book and the client list because his family is going to start an investigation tomorrow, and Lou goes into shock thinking that this is the end, that no matter what thesis he understands in Reino Akim they are just a local gang compared to Zippel. He says that if anything comes up during the investigation, Crit Zippel will be the end of the thesis. So while they are investigating, and he says that that is all he has at the auction, so he asks if there is more, and Lou says that yes, there are others stored in the warehouse, but they are at the employee's house, and if he lets them with him temporarily he can bring him right away. So he says it will take up to 2 hours, but Jean asks what the fuck he's trying to do because he's going to destroy important documents and then see if he's real and why he's looking at the guys he bribed, and the boy tells him to go ahead and do whatever he can, but he must not forget that he is in the palm of Jin's hand, and even with a lot of hatred he says that he will be right back. So he tells him to drive along the edge of the warehouse while he is away, and he tells his subordinate to keep him inside the mansion until he comes back, and he comes out of there cursing Jean. After all, he's acting all arrogant like that, and he wonders if the boy means that he's in control of everything that happens. He says that he spent a lot of money on Zipfel, he will get anything he can to buy them back. In the meantime, Murikan is making a mess, sending the pie strawberry take what he wants, but she asks if it's okay, and he says there's probably nothing there that hasn't been stolen, so he says, which is just rubbish. But he asks the boy about that guy, and he says that he will realize that he is not true as soon as he comes back, and he is curious about what Jean is going to do, so he asks what the dragon means. They are just shopping for free and running away before he comes back, so he finally manages to find the ring he was looking for. Example asks if they are going to keep doing reckless things like that, and says that he is still very surprised, but Jean says that he will take it as a compliment. And then Jet appears shouting for Jean, saying that he found the slave account document that he asked for. He wrote down all the ages and places of birth. Then he says that it was a good job and that they ended up there, and the guard says that the boss will arrive soon, free them from accounting, so he must wait in the mansion until then. But Jean simply deletes the guy, but Jet is incredulous at what is happening and says that he is incredible because not only can he cast magic but he can also fight, and he keeps asking himself why the boy is beating the student subordinate. So Jim asks if Jet has a family. He says yes, he has a son, so the boy tells him to take him and run away, preferably to the Vermont Empire, and Jet is surprised by this. Jim tells him to report back to Empire and introduce himself to Singh as an informant because it is the only way for him to live. But Jet starts to deny it, saying that he will stay by the boy's side until the end, and he thinks that he worked very hard for this chance and asks the boy to let him serve in your great deeds by your side rest of his life, and he thinks he wants to be successful for once. But Jean apologizes, saying he is not buried in Zipfel, and Jet's world just falls to the ground, asking how is it. Then 2 hours later, one of the subordinates speaks who heard something through the Zipfel hotline earlier that Zipfel had long gray hair, so he calls his boss and tells him to keep talking, and he says that they took the information about the slaves and the other customers, so they ran away, saying that the Tezin is over, and Alu, much more than a kid, orders them to be persecuted while his subordinate pretends to read. He has his face on the wall and orders them to catch whoever is left and bring back those lying bastards. He says he will finish them off with his own hands. So Murikan asks the boy if he has any reason to wander around because he doesn't think he has anything good to gain by messing with Hello. So Jean says he needs to see if he's connected to Run Candle, so the dragon says that is right, and he speaks who will think about it while they say goodbye before leaving, and he says that the boy got Shem's grimoire and even a masterpiece, and says that he almost freaked out seeing that on the boy's brothers. As soon as they left the auction, he asks how he knew of something that old and managed to catch it, and while they are talking a red light appears in the sky and they recognize that they are there, and Jean soon gets up saying that they are going to have a little talk, and then the light arrives there saying that he is calling them scammers, asking if they thought they would be able to trick Alu and run away. He says he's going to hang him in the market and make an example for others, and he'll show what happens when he messes with Tezin's boss, Alu the Spider Hand. So Jean starts saying that the record that has the names of slaves kidnapped from Vermont was rewritten, and he says that the transaction book with the ancient grimoire that the Zipfel family is looking for, as well as the customer record that list all nobles who turned a blind eye to them, he spread it around the world, and even tomorrow the whole world will be watching him. And he says that the magic mail is something very convenient, and to be honest it's over for him. So he starts to get irritated with the kid, saying he won't give him a quick death, he's going to tear him up alive, and every time he faints from pain he will wake him up by burning him with flames. So the boy talks to the Murikan, saying that he wants to go just against him, so the Murikan goes ahead going to face all the rest of them, and he starts calling the boy, asking if he thinks he can win alone, and tells everyone not to stand still, and he says he only wants the boy alive, he must kill everyone else. But when they attack the Murikan, he simply manages to easily defeat them with a movement of his hand, and continues defeating several of them as he walks, and everyone who stops in front of him they are defeated with just one blow, and he continues making his line to the point that the opponents start to fear coming close to him. So Lu asks what they are waiting for to attack, but they say that if they use their magic now they will end up hitting their allies. So Lu sends them we will aim, asks Guile to move away, and when they invoke their magic they launch it at the boy, but he realizes that everyone is below 5 stars and only his necklace can stop all the attacks. He says that his wife got a little easier thanks to his sister Luna, and says that despite all this he left without even saying goodbye to her. Meanwhile Murikan starts to let loose, saying that they are weak and have nothing but numbers. Then he starts to invoke his flames and tells everyone to die at once, and lifts the ground with his flames, and Lu, in turn, looks like he's stupid looking at all that and starts laughing like a psychopath right after he launches a cut transversal, and everyone else asks what happened to their boss. They say that the boss went crazy, and Jean in turn thinks that if he went crazy it will save work, and Murikan tells the boy that he already took care of everyone just like he asked, so he can get comfortable now, and Lu starts to ask who sent them. They're asking who is behind this, but Murikan says it's none of his business, after all he's going to die anyway, and then he attacks Jean with a very quick cut, and Lu says he won't know know if the boy talks the truth and asks what he's going to do because he doesn't intend to lose Ali, and Murakami says that the boy finally found someone worthy of fighting, and he says that the rumors that Lu was a 7-star martial artist were true, and he says that this crazy person is different from the one I face against whom he fought before. After all, this one is dying to kill him, and he tells the boy to do what he can and not die, and then he starts calling the boy arrogant, asking how dare he come to a direct confrontation being a wizard. He asks if he is there taking it. Then Jean takes out his sword and throws it at him, and he realizes that something is wrong because the wizard is using a sword. He tries to hit the boy but he manages to dodge, and he finally realizes that Jean wasn't a mage, so he goes after the boy again, each time increasingly angry, and then Jean manages to stop his attacks until he tries to hit him and Lu disappears, appearing behind the boy. He is surprised by this but manages to dodge the attack but still receives a superficial cut from him, so he realizes that Lu it's very quick, and he bets that the guy isn't even taking it seriously, but he's still having difficulty. So the gang asks if the fireball at the auction was from an artifact, and Lu thinks that Nessa got involved in such a simple scam, says that the problem isn't the kid, it's that guy who destroyed all his servants alone because he's sure he would lose to him, and he wonders why Murakami is just watching, and besides looking he's making fun of the boy. And Geely asks if Murakami is going just look, and she says that she knows what Jim asked for, but she asks if it's not too early for him to fight a 7-star alone. Well, Murakami tells Strawberry Pie that everything is fine, after all he needs to learn to value own life, so she says that it's true, and he also asks her if she still thinks that the kid is going to lose, and she gets scared by that, so Jean manages to deflect the aluminum sword, but her eyes widen seeing his next attack, and he screams that it's the end of the boy. However, Murakami laughs, saying that in the past, when the swordsman magician's rum candle predominated, a difference of 2 stars was nothing, so Jean activates that fireball again, throwing it at close range at Lu, who manages to defend himself, noting that it wasn't a artifact, and he realizes that the boy is a magical swordsman, so Jean drops his cape and begins to invoke electrical power by sticking his sword into the ground and invoking lightning, and then he attacks the student with several lightning bolts, and he says that this is lame, saying that if he keeps his guard so low he will die in the blink of an eye, but the boy continues to stand still, storing more and more spiritual power in his ring when he summons his helmet, and Lu tries to attack him but notices that there is something strange because he sees the boy with a black helmet in his head and asks what the fuck is that, and he takes his sword out of the ground, throwing it at Lu and breaking him in half, and the boy just appears behind him, deactivating half of his helm and seeing Lu falling, and after Jean undoes his Murakami he says that as he thought that is Milta's rune, and Gilly asks what that is, and he says that it is an artifact created a few thousand years ago. It was created by a demon called Milta for her lover. The first emperor of Vermunda says that in the past it was an infinite war. He also says that this is a masterpiece that protects it from attack by 7 stars below, but he asks how it ended up in the hands of bandits. Then the boy remembers Milta's rune. He says that it was an object that was only revealed to the world 5 or so years later with an offer to the Emperor of Vermont, and he says that the media and academics couldn't stop talking about Elmo, and that made the boy remember where he was first found. And so he asks Lu El to answer something first of him dying. He asks if it is true that he has connections with Run Kandel. Murakami says that the boy got things confused by asking for him. He's trying to get an answer from a crazy man on the edge of death, but Lu starts to laugh, saying that now he understands everything. He's Jean Run Kandel, and Lu says he heard about it, that he had failed. He says that it's true, but he is merely the youngest son and he won't be able to stop that person. So Jean wonders what the fuck that guy is talking about, but he also notes that the spider hand is probably not the one real name about him. He says that he will investigate that guy because he was not only a 7-star martial artist resorting to controlling a black clan, as he seemed to be connected with Run Kandel, but Murakami says that this is not strange. After all, one of his ancestors even had 1 bar, even though it is 9 stars. He says that he still needs to find out who that person is that Lu mentioned. After all, a Kandel is a clan that he will lead in the future, so he needs to do this. He keeps thinking about Hello's speech where he said he had failed, and also when he said that he wouldn't be able to stop that person. He says that if he failed it's because he knew who he was, so what failed was the illusion of the blade. He says that the fact that he said he couldn't stop that person because he's younger, it's because it has to do with the battle for hegemony with his brothers, and he says he's going to get Yuna out of it since she completely gave up on the house. And it's not like it's the twin brothers or Mi Yen, they're new and too inexperienced to have such influence. He says that the rest of them are not that intelligent or diligent enough to do something like that, and someone sensitive to hegemony and who would do something after recognizing his talent would probably be the future successor Joshua Run Kandel, and he says that he is the only suspect. It's likely whether he's jumping to conclusions or not. This will soon be revealed. Then the next day the newsboy starts talking about Tezen falling during an investigation between the Zipf and Vermont, and they say that the evil organization that tormented people fell in a single day. Then Jean says that Jet did his job well. He says that he has lost, that he was threatened by Zipfel and Vermont, but it is a mere small price to pay for for his life, and Murikin says that that trash deserved something worse, but he says that finally the credit is going to the Zipfel and the Vermins, but the one who profited the most was Jean himself, and he says that it's true because he got the ring and the magic tomes. That he even dueled against a 7-star knight, but Geely calls him, saying that not all 7-star knights are equal and he can't let his guard down just because he defeated Lu. She says he should be more careful next time. He says yes because he still can't face something superior like Guile herself, and he understands that, and he'll be more careful next time. And he says that now he doesn't think anyone will come after him, all because of Jet, and he says they can go to their next destination without any problems. And she asks where are they going, and he says he's going to the city free of Taiken and Gile. He asks if he's thinking about Taiken because of the 7-colored peacock. He says that's what it is, but Murikin doesn't know what that is, and he explains that it's a group of giant information traffickers there, and he says that they are considered the most reliable source of information after Ron Kandel, Zipfel and Vermund's information agency. So Murikin asks if he intends to use them like he used the Jet so he can choose who should die, and Murikin says it's not a bad idea, and the boy agrees with that. They soon set sail on a boat, and Jean says that he needs an organization that justifies his actions to guile Murikin while he follows his memories in the face of regression, and the boy says that it's not just that, as he also has a lot of things he needs to investigate, as he still has the confusion of Mistletoe, Evivilliano, Buvard and Kinzel, and he also talks about Alu's past which may be connected with Run Kandel, Cologne ruins and forbidden magic, and that's why Taiken is the best place thanks to the 7-colored peacock. So Murikin talks to the boy saying that he discovered that magic scent left behind. He says it seems to be light magic, so the boy is surprised by this because he thought they were all lost since ancient times, but the dragon says this is no big deal, and Tizen and Zipfel were enemies in the past. He says that erasing those they considered problematic from history is a specialty of the Zipfel clan, and that's probably why there are no records, and he says that if Jay doesn't manage to launch the apex of spiritual energy, the clan Run Kandel will end up with a similar fate. And the dragon talked to he who learns this now will be important for the future, so the boy asks if he will show him this now because he likes how Murikin is pulling his sleeves, and the dragon tell him to cheer up because this is probably the magic he will need most now. Then he shows a black Rensingen in his hand and tells him to look closely and pay attention, and Jim keeps looking closely asking why it's black if it's light magic, and then a flashbang goes in his face leaving the boy almost blind, and the Murikin starts laughing at him saying that he just took a look, but it looks like the boy swallowed his eyes, and Jim wonders why he did that but says that the dragon is right, this can be used to attack and to defend himself, and he says yes because that is called a photon cannon and the most precious Zen magic. He says that now the boy has managed to understand compared to that magic tome history or whatever. He asks what did he find, and the dragon says that it is encrypted in a way that even irritates him. He says he doesn't know what's there, but maybe it could be useful for the boy, so Jean tells him to leave it alone. He says that someday they will end up finding a skilled cryptologist, and a week later they disembark in a city, and they say that it seems to be full of life, saying that it has a perfect concept of a free city, and Geely asks why they don't look for an inn first, and the boy tells them to go to the city center, but then the Murikin detransforms from the cat asking if he won't choose a shitty place again, and the boy tells Murikin that Ivy told him 1,000,000 times to stop transforming in the middle of the city. However, he retorts, telling the boy that he has already said 1,000,000 times that humans are not interested in others. However, a little girl appears saying that the cat became a person, and she says that the black cat became a guy in black, and she asks how he did this. They start to get scared because the girl is asking them to teach her this. I think she is holding a dragonite. But then they start trying to fool the girl, saying that she was wrong because like a cat she would become a person. She says that she's not you, she's Yuria. She says she wasn't mistaken, the black cat became that guy. She asks why you're lying. He says he's not lying and he's not a gentleman either, but the girl keeps saying he's lying. Yes, and he is also a gentleman, and Jim says he already gave her a lollipop, so she just doesn't pretend she didn't see it, but she tells him not to ask her to lie. So Geely asks what they do, saying they are going to take the girl to the guards as she appears to be lost. But these rumors spread and they end up being found by Zipfel, but Murikin asks Strawberry Pie not to worry, saying that who would believe a child, but she looks at him very seriously saying that this wouldn't be a problem if he had simply listened to the young master. Then I notice that they got to the guards and say that they don't like them, e.g. ask what happened, and the girl keeps saying that she doesn't like them, they bother them and make things difficult for her mother. So Geely says that has a bad feeling about this, asking if they are a group that extorts, but Jean says that there is a chance that the girl's mother is a criminal and says that they are going to go into check, so they recognize Yuria, and the guard tells them to call the boss because the Yuria arrived. And then Jim asks if the guard knows this girl, and he says yes, they are acquaintances, after all she is his boss's daughter, so he is incredulous about this. And soon the girl's mother arrives, and Jim, looking at that woman, realizes that head of guarding is not her only job, and she is huge, full of muscles and with a not so good face, but she laughs running towards Yuria with a smile on her face. Then the two hug and she tells her daughter that she already sent her no going too far, but the girl says that her mother doesn't play with her and she apologizes apologizes, telling her daughter that she's going to play a lot after work, and she asks if she promises that they continue in this super cute scene while the three of them don't know how to react to all that, and the boss says that since the most people in the city know Yuria, she was a little careless, and apologizes for the late introduction, saying that she is Taikon's chief of defense, Elizabeth Czar, and in this the boy introduces himself as Jane Grey and says that he came to Taikon for tourism, and boss says he needs to thank him, asking if he has anything needed. He asks her to recommend a good inn, but when she was about to speak, the girl arrives to speak in her mother's ear and tells her something. Elisa asks for a piece of paper and a pen and writes something to the boy saying that this is an introduction letter with his badge as boss, and says that any place will welcome him if he shows that. She thanks him again for finding his daughter, and the boy says that it was nothing and he should be the one to thank. So they leave, and her mother talks to the girl again, asking if a cat really turned into that man, and she says yes, but they didn't want to admit it, so she let it slip, and Elisa says she did a good job. After all, everyone has a secret or two, so she think about the transformation. After all, this is something that only dragons are capable of doing this. And when she arrives at the inn, Geely says that the service is incredible, and also says that the only place she received treatment like that was in Hofer, and the master bed says that that bed is damn comfortable. That's how an inn it must be. She says it is the power of the introduction letter. He says everything will be fine in Chikan. After all, they have been very lucky since they arrived and taking advantage of the atmosphere. Geely asks to try that lollipop he gave her for Ariel. After all, she heard that Taikon is famous for them. He says that she doesn't need to ask for something like that, telling the girl to just make herself comfortable, and she leaves. And Murakin says that this is refreshing because it's as if they were really on a trip. And in this one he asks the boy how he plans to find the much acclaimed 7-colored peacock, because he doesn't seem like an easy person to find, and the boy says that he is planning to look for someone else first, and he thinks of the 7-colored peacock as the biggest drug trafficker information in Tika. And at the center of it all there is a man called Kashmir the Ghost Blade, and Jim says that he is such a well-known swordsman that even Run Kandel tried to offer him a position as an instructor of beginner cadets, and that is all the public knows about him. And 10 years later, Kashmir reveals that he is a deposed prince of Vermont, using the information he gathered from the 7-colored peacock. His sovereignty is recognized by the Vermont Zipfel and Run Kandel, and thus becoming the first governor in the Taikan Free City. That he speaks that he is someone not only skilled in swordsmanship but also capable of hiding and preparing himself for a long time, and he says that this man may be able to help him with the peacock, but he keeps wondering how he could create a connection with him. But soon someone comes up the stairs, and Gilly runs in saying that something is wrong there. After all, there is not a single person inside the inn. She says that not only the other customers but also all the employees are gone, and she says that there is something wrong with that. Someone touches the shoulder of the girl, and this person, he asks if he can come in, and as he looks at him touching the shoulder of the strawberry pie, Murakin goes crazy, and Jim recognizes him as using the ghost blade and asks for him, but as he speaks Murakin runs away and sticks to the wall, grabbing it and breaking it with his fingers. And the only thing Jean has time to say is for Murakin to stop and don't kill him. If Kashmir didn't lock everything he had to lock, I'm a stainless steel refrigerator with 3 doors. And then as he looks at the half-transformed Kashmir, he asks if he doesn't. I wanted to know who they are, and the man gets upset looking at it, and he says, well, they're not that cool, kid. That shape of the Murakin is very absurd. My god, that look. Then this look at those teeth. My god, what a beautiful art. And then Jim asks why Kasim is there, and he says that there shouldn't be anything to do here, and he also says that they haven't caused any trouble since they arrived in Taikan, and more importantly than that, he's not alone. He came with a lot of people, and that's how they're going to get beaten badly. So Jean tells Murakin that the place is very small, and if he fights their child could get hurt. And when he talks about the ice, the dragon returns to normal, and he asks Kashmir if he knows who he is, but with Kashmir frozen, the dragon, he starts to get pissed off, asking why he's being so informal. He says all this while he's holding ice in his arms, and he asks if Kashmir underestimates everyone because he has a sword tied to his waist and walks with his servants, and Jean is happy because he finally held on. So Kashmir starts to say that that's not what he meant, but the dragon continues to be pissed off, asking what he meant because he invaded out of nowhere and put it in, and tells him to respond, asking that he knows who he is. But Kashmir continues saying that he's not the dragon. He continues to be even more pissed off, and Jim finally tells him to stop saying that that is enough, and he says that the authorities are not after him, so he tells him to calm down and put away his sword. Regan recognizes him as Kashmiri Blade Ghost and says that he has heard a lot about him. Do you know? Very well. Then he asks how he knows his name. He also asks who he is, and the boy introduces himself as Jean Run Kandel, and everyone is surprised that he is introducing himself like that, and the boy says that it seems like he has a lot to talk to him, so call him to another place because he will answer all the questions with just the 4 of you. Jim thanks him for dismissing his soldiers because it seems like he trusts him, but Kashmir starts saying that he brought the soldiers after receiving a report about a dragon having appeared, but that was a mistake. After all, it only made him angrier. He says that he's sure that crazy guy is a dragon. After all, that intense pressure wasn't from a human, and he says that if the boy boy hadn't stopped him everyone would have died, and he says that woman is definitely Jilly Mac Rowland, and he says he met her before he was deposed from the Vermont Palace. And he still remembers the military prestige she showed in the training camp back in the day, but he can't feel any trace of her aura, and he asks if she has a connection with the two. Then he goes back to talking to Jean, confirming that he says he is Jean Run Candel. He says that it looks like he is not lying, but he has a question about that, and he questions why the boy is with the dragon. After all, since ancient times dragons they made contracts with wizards who have a contract with a god or someone who has a special power. For example, not a Run Candel but a Zipfel. So he asks the boy's family if they know he has a dragon, and the boy says they don't know. So Kashmir say that if this gets out, his family won't stay still, but he says that he is telling this secret that could cost his life without hesitation. He says that the most important thing is not the fact that he is a Run Candel, but because Kashmir came to see the dragon, and then he says that since the boy told him a big secret he will also tell his. He talks about his daughter Yuria, who he met, and the reason he came there is that she said that a cat turned into a person, and Jim asked if he believed in the words of a child. He says that his daughter is not a normal child. He says that she is an Asmol contractor. Then the boy asks if he is talking about the god of vision. He says that it is him because there is no way his daughter, his contractor, saw anything wrong. So Jim says that he must know that there are so many powerful people in the world who would like to be Asmol's contractor, and he asks if Kashmir is sure he can tell them something like that easily, but Murikan says there is something wrong there, because if she is a contractor, where is her dragon? He speaks that he didn't feel any dragon energy near the girl. He says that Asmol dragons are known for valuing their contractors a lot, but to leave a child alone, there are strange things there. So Jean says he doesn't know what the situation is, but it seems to be that, and Kashmir says the boy hit the nail on the head. Her guardian dragon suddenly disappeared a year ago. He says it looks like Zipfel or the Vermont Empire had something to do with him, but it's just a theory. But Murikan says that doesn't make sense because there isn't a dragon in this world dumb enough to be kidnapped, and he says that it would get worse if it were for a year, but he realizes something, realizing that his daughter is only 5 years old. He says that's it. So if the child really is a contractor of 000, it means that if her dragon is not near in this city, she will soon go crazy or be bedridden for the rest of her life. So Kashmir is shocked by this, asking what he is talking about, and Murikan tells him to listen carefully because Asmol contractors can see the future, and humans know about this, but seeing the future is a great tool of a dragon's mentality, and right now she is too young to differentiate between dreams and reality, so nothing much happened, and if she keeps seeing the future without protection like now, after 1 or 2 years his eyes will become uncontrollable. So he tells Murikan to explain this properly. He asks if the girl continues to see the future, she will end up in bed, and the dragon says that this is related to the principle of causality. The one who sees the future must follow what he saw, and like this, if they don't do this, Asmol's punishment will begin, and if someone sees the future of someone else's death, he can't do anything. The contractors who interfere with the principle of causality will end up being destroyed. He says that from the beginning his daughter was living in a different world from the one they are in now. He says that looking at his face it looks like it's true, and he says that Kashmir needs to find the guardian dragon as soon as possible and put it close to her. There is no other way. So he kneels to the dragon, saying that although the manager hadn't mentioned it, he is the leader of the information center of the 7 Colors Peacock, and he says that he is confident about his abilities. However, for a whole year he couldn't find his daughter's guardian dragon, and then Murikan says that with that he is sure to find his daughter as soon as they arrive. Cheek, and it was not a mere coincidence. Asmol is asking them to help his young contractor. So Kashmir starts to ask him a favor, but he says that's not it, because he won't do anything even if he asks him. He says that he has to ask his leader, pointing to the boy who is behind him, asking what he is going to do. Then Jean comes close to Kashmir, telling him to get up because although their relationship is recent, it involves the life of a child, and tells him to first be rational because they are going to look for the guardian dragon of Yuria together. And Kashmir, already emotional, says that he will never forget the kindness of the young master, and the boy thinks that he cannot be satisfied even if things are turning out better than he planned, because not even the peacock has colors. He managed to discover the whereabouts of the dragon, and he says that this means they need to form the Zipfel family or Run Candel. In that, Murikan asks the boy if Tychon also has Zipfel, and he says no, because Chan is just a city, they are not affiliated with anyone. So the dragon says that this is great and asks Kashmir if they are really good with information, which he asks if they would have information about dragons, and he says yes, they do. You know which continent has the most dragons? So Murikan says this is great, they must talk all about which dragons they are in the Vermont Empire. So Jim gets scared and says that this method is kind of a last resort. He says that normally there is nothing that dragons don't know. So in a cabin someone talks to Kim Cantel, telling her to see this, so she asks Enya what she hears, and Yuria starts talking about Jin's news again, saying that he is incredible because he is almost the same age as her and is already at 5 stars, and that Cantel says to Yuria that she is also a contractor of a god and she can be like him, but the girl wonders if that would really be the case, and Cantel says yes, because unlike the boy in the family whose guardian is a guy with black hair, she is the contractor of the god of time is much more. But as she was about to complete her sentence, she feels a presence and tells Enya to go back home and not leave until she comes back. She asks if anything happened and Cantel says it's nothing big, it's just a dark thing came there. Then the design. This manhwa is absolutely incredible. Look at this one that Cantel. Then Murican starts flying over the sea telling the boy that they are almost there. He will get closer and release his energy, then the dragons in Vermont will come on their own. He tells the boy to hide a lot well and Jean agrees with this and as he stops standing and says that he will start releasing his aura to all corners. Then Jean remembers Kashmir giving a list of all the active dragons in Vermont. Then while Murican notes the names that are on the list, he notices Vergier and Kukantel and is a little hesitant but tells Jean that it will work, and Jean asks if anything happened and he says that it was nothing as it could be a bit dangerous, but he tells them to go soon. After all they have a long way to go, and then Kashmir tells him to wait while calling him a big dragon, but Murican gets pissed off and tells him to call her by her name because he is not the leader of a weird cult. So Kashmir answers this and says thank you for the dragon because he will trust his daughter, and then before leaving, Murican says that she is going to say two things to him. Rin in the present thinks that he pretends not to care about the others, but his black dragon is very attentive, so he says that the dragons are coming and two of them are coming very quickly. He recognizes them as Labum and Umtiel. He says that he already ended their race before, so he tells the boy to equip his helmet because he will respond like that, and Jim asks how much he hit them for them to come. Just feeling energy, and Murican says that in the past, poor people who entered into his territory was beaten immediately, so he says that this is good for the dragon. But the other one, the earth dragon, asks why he is there, and the Murican says that there is something he needs to do after he woke up from his long sleep and asks for help, and the dragon starts to wonder whether or not they tell him something, so the dragons talk to him saying that they don't know what he needs, but now is not the best time, and they ask him to save himself by telling him to hurry up and get out of there because he has his young contractors within that area, and Umtiel know he wants to cause confusion in the seas of Vermond, and Murican starts asking how they use sending him away because in the sky there is no place where Murican can't be, so the dragon says he's a pain in the ass, he can't take it anymore, telling him to run away soon from there because the energy he is releasing is causing chaos. He asks what the dragon is talking about, and he talks about Kim Cantel. She is flying there right now to kill there, and the dragon realizes he messed up, and Jim says if it is about what Cantel, what are they talking about? They are talking about the silver dragon. Jean asks what Murican's relationship is with the guardian dragon of the god of time. Comes back and Murican says that she is like his ex, and Jean is incredulous at what he is hearing, and the dragons beg their boss to they will simply leave because their contractors are still young, and if they fall into the crossfire they can die, and then the other threatens him saying that the other dragons don't know that he has awakened, and if he doesn't go now there will be rumors, but when they notice it's too late, and the dragon tells Jin to hold on, and a huge beam of lightning comes towards him which Murican can only dodge, and so the earth dragons leave saying they're going to curse Murican, and Jim is wondering what's happening, but Murican says he doesn't lose focus because there comes more and other rays appear in his direction. He continues dodging them all by a 3, and Jim realizes that it is a supreme ability that is at the level of 8 stars or even higher. He asks how many of these they can use once, and the dragon screams for Murican saying that not even death will be enough for him, and she asks how he dares to appear there, and then Jay asks if he fights this monster now, and Murican says that he thinks so, and Jean tries to understand more about the story of his ex, asking how long he stayed with her. He says he stayed 500 years and in human years about 5, and he gets straight to the point saying that when he gets it he should stick the Bradamanti in her, and Jim asks if she's not exaggerating a bit, little being his ex, but Murican says that it seems like the boy doesn't know. After all, he doesn't hang out with those who are inferior to him, so when the situation gets ugly he gathers his strength at once and causes destruction, and he says he has to do all this to get it right, so he puts himself in front of her, and Cantel says that even if he wants to run away it's too late, and she transforms into her dragon form, which by the way is very incredible, and says she's going to kill him there in that sea, so Murican starts asking her to Cantel calm down. After all, he knows she hates him, but now that's not important. He says they need to take care of something urgently and then talk, but she doesn't even want to know and starts attacking him, and she keeps chasing the Murican, so he gets hit and almost goes flying, and while he barely has time to stabilize himself she bites him again, and he asks her why she's so upset, but she obviously doesn't respond and continues hitting him, and then tries to throw lightning at burning clothes, and he says that from this distance it will be difficult, but it is not hit, and when she looks up there is a dark ball on top of the dragon, and he absorbs all that spiritual energy and asks what she did, and she says he is a fool because he doesn't know how weak he has become, and she says he is very mistaken if he thinks it's the same as before, and he asks her to stop for old time's sake, and he says he only came there because he needed to ask something. She talks about old times because if she thinks about it tearing the whole thing up won't be enough, and when she attacks him again and he holds her and bites her, Asa tells her to calm down, asking her why she's exaggerating so much since the only only thing they did was break up, but apparently she doesn't think it was just breaking up and says that's exactly why he's getting hit. He doesn't understand why but enjoys it, an opening sending the boy on to run Cantel, and then he throws himself at her. She is impressed because he is a human. He thinks that her scales are rigid enough that not even Muriken can bite, and it will be difficult for him to be able to pierce her, but with a small opening and with what's left of Muriken's shadow energy he will be able to do something, so he embeds everything in the sword and sends a release of shadow energy, throwing the sword at the dragon's wing and trying hard enough to pull her out, and not only does the wing fly away but so does Kim Cantel's arm. So Muriken runs to help the boy as she falls into the water, and Muriken says that it looks like he ran out of energy but it was a good job, but the only thing he can think about is that he just becoming a dragon slayer out of nowhere. But Muriken says that now they have to wait and see if she has calmed down a bit. Magic is surprised, asking what he is talking about and asking if that wasn't enough, and Muriken says that a normal dragon would have died, but when is Cantel different, and dragons that can manipulate time don't die easily. And then they see several gears appearing underneath them and they notice that maybe they could end up disappearing long before they can find the lost dragon. So, after Cantel goes back in time, her arm returns to her body, and Jean asks if she really came back, and Muriken says that's why authority and magic are different things, but he tells the boy not to worry too much, and although it's a deception, it consumes a lot of magical power too, but he tells the boy just in case not to move a single finger. So Cantel returns to his human form and he asks if she has calmed down a little, and he says he didn't know she had resentments to the point of going crazy. It is. He asks her if they didn't end well, but she starts saying that he left her and they didn't even have a chance to talk, and she asks if that's what he calls ending well, but he says that she got angry when he talked about breaking up, and he says that honestly he didn't cheat and he only ended it because their personalities don't match. So Jean stands in the middle of them asking if this is really a conversation about dragons that have lived for thousands of years. So Muriken throws everything out, saying that he didn't come there to fight, he just came to ask her something. But first she asks her question, asking if that human is Soddard's contractor, but Muriken says it doesn't matter, after all one of them is in danger now. But Kim Cantel doesn't like his speech at all, asking about who it would be one of them because he is very despicable, he also killed so many dragons, and she asks what he is talking about now, asking if he is joking with her and if she thinks about how many dragons died by his hand, but he says yes, among them he was the mortal enemy of her older brother, and he says that for his revenge he killed someone he didn't know and had nothing against him, and then he gets tired saying that it's his fault for wanting to ask her something and says that he should have asked her another dragon. Then she starts calling him, asking him to wait, and says that whenever she sees him he gets all emotional and says that he can ask, and apologizes for what he said. Then he says that recently one of the dragons, guardian of Asmil, disappeared. She stays in doubt about it, asking what did it mean that it disappeared, and if he's talking about Tychons. Later he says that must be the name. Then Jean realizes that now they are getting to the main topic, but Cantel says that this is strange, after all that child was taken by Viorita not long ago, and he remembers who Verita the wind dragon is, and he says he is one of Melzer's dependents, the god of the wind and also dragon guardian of the deputy head of the Zipfel family, Andre, and he asks if this is a Zipfel thing again, and that Cantel says he is sure that they were going to teach draconic magic to later, and she says that she thinks they should get out of there because if they go back a little they can avoid the trap and go to Vermont, and so she calls them both to go to her house, and when they get there they go to a forest on the outskirts of the capital of Vermont, and Jean says that he was unable to introduce himself before saying that he was Soldat's contractor, and that Cantel asks if he is a descendant of Timar and the newest run Kandel Jinso. He asks how she knew, but the singer asks how she wouldn't know when he has the same aura of fear, and she says that the three of them were together a lot 1,000 years ago. She says that she just guessed that he was the youngest, and the guardian dragon's reaction was great, so she goes straight to the point, saying that Verita took the bark a year ago. Muriken asks, she's saying she was fooled when they said they would teach draconic magic, and he says that doesn't sound good, but Cantel says it could be true, but he told her that Asmil's current contractor is very young to control the authority, and then she asks if it wouldn't be dangerous if the guardian dragon wasn't by her side. He says that's right, Viorita should have known that, and she says that as expected they have a different reason, and he says that as she said as expected she must know something. Then she says that when Verita took the later she stopped in Vermont and said that she would present the later to him, but she continued to be obsessed with her contractor, and he asked to meet her for no reason, just once, but that he could sing with her temperament, no could let this go. She says that she had no choice since the identity of her contractor had already been revealed, and she says that since there are many people close to Zipfel in the upper class of Vermont, if she Jim without thinking she wouldn't be able to make her contractor stay. But then Jean talks to her, talking about her having said that the identity was revealed but the Asmil contractor was not revealed, and he says that it is suspicious how they knew this and approached the later, and Muriken says that this is really strange and asks if a contractor detection magic was created while he was sleeping, but Cantel says that this is impossible and no one can find out about the contractor until he manifests his authority, and she says that even if this magic existed how would it be beneficial to them. But but Jean says that they would benefit in two ways. First, they could minimize the dangers and eliminate the contractors outside their territories, and the second is if they kill the contractor, the Zephyl family can get the opportunity to manage to make a contract with the god. And Jim says that in fact it is not just an opportunity to make a contract, he is sure that they have the method, and he says that in his past life the contractor of the god of time Ulta officially appeared on the statue of stone in 10 years, and the contractor was a pure-blooded Zephyl. He is sure they can make a contract with the god if they kill their contractor, and that is why the dragon guardian of Uria was kidnapped, and since he saw nothing about the princess of Tychon in her past life, she must have died. And that Cantel says that Jean seems to have a lot of suspicions, but she can't believe that because he already has so many contractors, so why? And she asks if he isn't being overly suspicious because he is the enemy, but Jean tells she says she's telling lies that even she doesn't believe, and he says he doesn't know what it's like for dragons, but there's no end to human greed. Even if they reach the top they won't be satisfied and they'll want more things, and so will they. They are people who have been in the reigns for thousands of years. Whatever they did is not strange, and he is sure that the bosses are planning something, and he is not sure why she is pretending not to know, and he asks her if maybe she is afraid of the Zephyl and Murican family. Soon enters the middle telling her to wait, saying that everyone knows about Zephyl's greed, and besides he hates to admit it, but it's true that they are very strong, and he says that nothing bad comes from being careful, so he won't ask her help but asks her to leave Vermont. Then she starts laughing, saying that Murican has changed a lot in thinking that he would read the weather, and she says that it's okay, she will make her contractor run away first and will help him, and Murican is in disbelief with that, and she says that she needs to meet Violetta and find out the truth. She says that these two things he said are true, they must be looking for an opportunity right now, and if she calls they will probably come flying right away, and she touches the boy, saying that furthermore she has a debt to fear, and since one of his descendants is there he reminded her of the old times, so she says that he provokes her even on purpose, and she says that even the boy's boldness reminds her of fear, so she says that she will call him Violetta. But then the contractor arrives, calling Kim Cantel. She asks who are those people. She tells Enia that she already told her not to leave, and she says that it's actually better that way, she's going to introduce them to them, and she says that that's Enia, God's contractor of time, comes back, and she introduces Murican as an old friend of hers and says that this is the contractor he is protecting. Jean Run Candel. I see the boy, she just sorta getting all happy that this is Jean Rum Candel, so he is in doubt, asking what is happening, and she says she forgot to tell him. After all, she has a little crush on Jim. Meanwhile, the girl continues asking him for an autograph, and after the girl freaks out seeing Jean, Santow asks how about she maintains her dignity with a contractor, and she starts to apologizing by saying that seeing Jim, who she only saw in news, made her lose her mind. She says it's a little late but introduces herself as Enia and says she's a plebeian but she's going to the gym as a scholarship holder, and Jim is impressed by that. After all, he really values the lineage of his contractors, and he says that this means that the girl is very talented, and he tells her not to worry because there is no need to be ashamed of having a lively encounter, so she asks if she can continue, but what Cantel says is that not saying who already told her no leaving the house until she said she could. Then she says that staying at home was very sad, so she thought it would be better to visit than Cantel, but suddenly Jean was in front of her, and as expected she made the right choice by going to meet him, and then Jean notices that Cantel is a little uncomfortable, and he says that a commoner student at the academy has something wrong because without seeing it he can imagine how much bullying they do to her, and that was why he didn't interact with these people in his past life. Then he starts to get mad about this, and she asks why Jean is there, and he says that the reason he is there is her, and he says that there is a chance that someone is after her as an idiot contractor, so he asks if she is coming with him, saying who is going to protect the girl, and then she turns red like a tomato, almost freaking out when she hears this, and says that her prayers have finally been answered, so Cantel asks her to stop it, but the girl keeps asking him to please take her with him, and her begins to exalt the god of time because he made this possible, but Cantel puts the girl to sleep and says that she was worried about her not wanting to go, but it seems like she worried for nothing, and seeing her like that, she says that if it's Jean, she will follow the boy to the Run dungeon. Candel, but he says that his family doesn't have anything like that, but Cantel says that he doesn't need to pretend since there is a dragon there, but while they are starting the Murican starts to snore, and Cantel says that he didn't even wait, so he talks directly to the boy talking about why, which she said would help him, and she says she has other reasons like keeping her loyalty to Fear and Enia's safety, but the main reason is that that guy fell asleep because of tiredness. And she says he doesn't know the weak one was left. She had a little difficulty, but he can't beat Violetta, and she says that if they need to fight Violetta, she will be the one who will fight, and Jim asks her if she is that strong, and she says yes, but Murican is very weak and her attack at sea would be a joke for the Murican from 1000 years ago. She says that now, who stop to think about whether they need a place to stay until Violetta arrives. She says they can stay at his house. He asks if that's okay, and Cantel says he just needs to convince that one because she's sure he's going to throw a tantrum because it's his ex's house, so Jean thinks to himself that different from the first impression he had, she's very attentive. He says she's going to convince the dragon and she says it's time. He asks if there's anything else and she says that in a while 10 seconds Enya will wake up, so she asks him to be careful with his words and explain the current situation to her, but Jean notices that she gave the girl a very strong blow and says that even a well-trained martial artist wouldn't wake up so quickly, but the girl comes back to life talking with Master Jean, and Cantel says that in this world there are things that go beyond common sense, and the girl wakes up like a zombie running after the boy. And the dragon simply steps away, leaving this cucumber in Jin's hand. So now that she is calmer, she understands that there is someone behind Taikon's contractor, and he's saying that she could be the next target, and she says that since she is, he'll trust her, and she says that it's an adventure scheme around a child and a girl, as well as dragons and Jean, and she says that this is very romantic, so he says that it can be considered, and Enya says that thinking positive is the best thing. She is going to prepare to leave her family and Taikon, and she asks when they are going to leave, and the boy says that the better before then it will be ready tomorrow, and says that the only family she has is her 7-year-old younger brother and an old dog called Pub. So Cantel tells her to go back and get ready, and she comes back before it gets too late and says that she will see them tomorrow, and that Cantel thinks he can just tell the gym that he's sick. He says yes, because if she says she's leaving the gym they'll investigate. They say that now they just need to worry about Violet, but they notice a presence and the person asks if there's anyone there home, saying he came to get one little firewood, and the Violet says that this is a very strange human being as there are many trees outside, but Jean asks her to wait, asking if she really thinks they came to collect firewood, and she is in doubt, and Jean wonders if all dragons are so carefree, and he says that the person outside must be someone from Vermund's Special Affairs Division. Then she asks why they are there, and he says it's because of Miss Enya. He says that they will continue to watch this place from now on. And they want to confirm who are the outsiders she brought, but Kim Cantel doesn't like the word watch at all, asking how dare they, so she opens the door and grabs the man's neck, lifting him up high, and tells him to tell the truth, asking if he's from the Division of Special Issues in Vermont, and he asks her why she is doing this, saying that she is not from that division, but she keeps asking who sent it to her, and then someone else appears saying that it was him and asks her to please release him, and she says that if she killing another division officer will come soon after. Then she realizes that this is the commander and says that if she needs to kill someone the best choice will be him, so she punches the guy, but even with all that noise he remains motionless, receiving the punches her, and asks if she has finally finished venting. And Jim is surprised that he stayed well after taking this direct attack, and he says that he is not someone normal from the Special Affairs Division of Vermont, and he talks about this red mask that only leaders within the division can use it. Then he says that in addition he has a curved sword, and there is only one person who fits these characteristics, the Emperor's right-hand man, the leader of Group 3 of the Vermont Special Affairs Divisions, the one named Hats, and he says that his family treats him as someone good with swords, and Jim says that without a doubt he is at least in the 8 stars, just from his energy, and the boy says that it was really good that he covered his face, since Cantel says that for humans he is very strong, in turn apologizes if offended, but they had no choice but to confirm the identity of the guest who entered illegally. He says that they have already confirmed this and are now returning, and Cantel asks if he is merely apologizing after invading his space in such a rude way. She says that there is a limit to how arrogant he can be, but Hats says that Missa just quickly left that house, and she asks if she doesn't think it's too dangerous for her to walk around so late at night like that alone, and that Cantel feels that the business is getting thicker, and Hats says that if they crowd there he would be able to hold her back, but she wouldn't be able to help Enya if something happened to her in the meantime, and he asks if she really wants to continue, otherwise he's already leaving, but Cantel tells him not to forget because the next time they go there he will have to put something important to him at risk, and he says that because of what he did, all the things he protected with his life, he will need to prepare to lose, and he sees that business is not good at all, and he says goodbye to her. Then he says that he confirmed the appearance of the outsiders. He tells her to come back and find out their identities. In the meantime all observations of the Silver Dragon will be suspended, but the subordinate asks if they shouldn't continue to keep an eye on the movements of Kim Cantel and the outsiders, but Raj says that if he continues provoking her it will be even worse. He will take responsibility, so he tells the man to go quickly, and he puts his hand under the mask and takes off the bloody mask, and he says that of course they are planning something. He tells the man that everyone will be in danger. He tells him to stop the observation until there is some different movement. He understands all this, and already at home Kim Cantel is saying a lot that he is an idiot for leaving Arena in this shit city. He says that if he and Murikan hadn't been there she could have easily thought about what could have happened, and Jim says it's a relief that they managed to avoid that for now, because he tells them to prioritize Enya's safety first, and she says yes, they're leaving tomorrow. And the next morning Jean says it's a relief to know that there was a merchant ship going to Taikon. He tells her not to worry because he gave the captain a lot of money, so he'll take good care of Enya, and besides Murikan is with she, then she doesn't need to worry, but she says that's what she worries about, and she says she will contact Viorita immediately and he will be able to find her as soon as the Murikan returns. So a week later the Murikan Murican returns to that house, but when Jean salutes him he says that Kim Cantel is grumpier than he expected, but Jim asks why he says that. He says that the two of them built this house when they were together in the past and he knows why she's making them stay there, and Jim asks if the heart is cold is getting warmer, but he tells him not to say shit like that because reliving old feelings is a difficult thing, but he says that these are the only memories. He says that 1000 years ago in a queer house just like this were the good old ones. Moments with Timar Kim Cantel. He says that it doesn't matter what they did in the past, everything was fun, but inside his dream he can't see Timar's face so he feels a headache, and Jim asks what was that, so he says that out of nowhere his head was hurting and what Cantel used to say to him that this is unfortunate, and asks if he is tired just from flying a little bit. He tells her to keep quiet because no matter how weak he got he wouldn't be so tired just from that, so she tells him get yourself together soon. Then Violetta's response arrived and she says that it will be tomorrow night on a deserted island on the south coast of Vermont and they will meet there, and Cantel gets in the middle of the way while the two hide, and he remembers what plan when he asked what she will do when she finds Viorita tomorrow, so she asks what he means by what because she said she called him to find out the whereabouts of the dragon guardian of Asmal later, and if he pretends to be innocent she will beat him. He then says that this is wonderful, and Murican says that if it were his boy he would just avoid an annoying situation like this, and he says that since she's not in the mood she can do what she wants, but Cantel tells him not to do anything because she's going to fight alone and she won't need him, but Murican says that even though he has become weak he doesn't want his ex's sympathy. However, Cantel asks who said it was sympathy and tells him to stop talking shit, and this has to do with Enya, and she says that too it's a dragon's honor thing, and Cantel says he will definitely. He goes alone and asks who he thinks is going to lose to him, so she tells him not to worry and be cool, but at the moment he says that honestly he thinks he won't see it just because if he really hijacks a later and they're planning to create one contract in a suspicious way it is almost certain that they will come prepared to the teeth, and then a gust of wind arrives along with the gigantic dragon and someone starts laughing saying that this is an honor because to think that he would be able to find the silver dragon of time. Cantel and says it's a pleasure. Meet him introducing himself as Andre Zipfel and saying that he is Mozia's contractor, but Kim Cantel shouts at Violeta saying that he thought she said he would come alone, and he says that when he received Kim Cantel's letter Andre was also present, and he says that just as he was interested in the story about another's contractor Andre was also very interested, so he said he would like to ask for her understanding. So what Cantel say to the Violet that he has been doing well road. He says that he caused a bad impression, so they get straight to the point because he has something to discuss besides the other's contract, but she gets straight to the point asking where the later is. He sees that there won't be much conversation and he realizes that he was deceived. Well, of course that was what she was thinking the whole time, and she tells him to answer asking if he disappeared with the later a year ago, and she says that since then Asmal's contractor I haven't been able to find his dragon. He says he doesn't know which answer will satisfy her, but Viorita says what later is fine, and Kim Cantel starts asking how dare he make jokes, so Violetta says she doesn't know what relationship she has with the Asmal contractor, but he says it's not a good idea to get involved with Zephyl, so she asks if he's really crazy because he kidnapped a baby dragon who has no idea about this world, and they are both amazed by the dragon's courage, and Violetta says that it seems like this will never end and summons two tornadoes alongside Kim Cantel, and to that he says who will make a proposal to her telling her to give him the contract and he will let her live. Then she says that he is very clueless because he is nothing more than an old reptile, and so he tells her to die at once and attacks Kim Cantel. However, his attacks can't reach her, and she says that she also has a proposal for him, telling him to return her later now and that will make him die a quick death in pain, and Andre, seeing this, starts to laugh shamelessly saying that it looks like she managed to easily dodge the attacks, Violet's attacks. Then he activates his magic saying that after many years he will be able to use his power to the fullest and activates a mana expansion, and Jim takes this opportunity to see the mana of a 9-star mage. He says that it is the first time he has seen this since of his rebirth. Then he remembers Andre Zipfel saying that he was rejected by the Run Candel and was a member of the prosperous Zipfel. He says that now he will just have to sit down and analyze to see what level he is at. Meanwhile, a dome of mana pops up at the scene and he tells Cantel to get ready, and she immediately thinks she needs to avoid it, but when she thinks she doesn't, a gust of wind comes from below and she realizes she can't fly, and they start making fun of her saying that the wind seems to be against her. Unfortunately, all the air on this island belongs to Violetta, and he starts to fly saying that Musier is the god of the wind and no one can fly without his permission, and he tells her that she will never reach the level of being his rival, summoning another gust of wind, and she calls him an idiot asking if his best he can do, but Andre says that's not enough and he's going to show her how it's really done by summoning a rain of thunder, so he asks if she thought he could only control the wind, and so the dragon attacks again. She uses a lightning storm together with Andre and they both fly at her, and Jean starts to despair calling the Murican, but he says not yet because it's true that Cantel is at a disadvantage, but they are still too confident, so Cantel invokes a halo on top of his head. He then gives a roar upwards and this halo makes him shiver and Jim realizes that time has stopped. I even recognized the magic of the two of them stops in time, and Andre is amazed at the power to control time that stops even magic, and he says that it's been a long time since he's seen something like that, but Cantel says that that day she's going to tear that filthy mouth of his into pieces. And he stops laughing quickly. Then he states that she got angry after seeing just one spell, so he tells Violetta to attack him soon. But Violetta is paralyzed and the dragon realizes that he can't move his body, and he asks if that is the power to control time, and as soon as Cantel attacks him, dodging that attack they sent, he then grabs the dragon and knocks Andre away, and when she attacks the dragon she flies together with Violetta and throws the dragon on the ground, and soon after she steps on him, making the dragon agonize. Then she comes with the bite directly on his arm and rips it off, and the dragon starts to agonize again, and Andre calls Violetta, but Cantel asks how dare they, and asks if he's going to keep talking while he mercilessly digs his nails into the dragon's chest, and Andre starts shouting for her to stop, asking her to stop that, but she tells him to stay quiet, saying that he's next, and she realizes that she managed to kill Violetta, but she used a lot of her power. He says that he better ask Jin for help from Muriken to kill the magician. Then Andre says that she went too far, and that kind of arrogance is only allowed to the strong, and he takes it away, a kind of stone, which looks like an egg, from inside his hobby, and Muriken notes that it is an orb of origin, and from there comes a bunch of caterpillars with Dent, who Muriken is surprised by that, saying that they should all have been destroyed. He asks how this guy has this, and a caterpillar with one eye and a very scary tooth appears behind Andre, and this same caterpillar starts screaming, crying, and he says that Cantel probably thought he would always be among the strong since he was born as a silver dragon of time, but she was wrong. Humans, dragons, even the gods in the end will all fall on Zipful's flag, so he tells her to stop resisting and die, and that worm goes on top of the dragon, biting Kim Cantel's side. Then it talks a little about the orb of origin. He says that it is a security measure created by the gods to prevent complete destruction if the world were in danger. He says that this measure created by the powers of all the gods was eventually destroyed by themselves, not only because it became too strong but because it could become the reason for the destruction of the world. Then the Muriken starts to wonder how this thing that should have been destroyed ended up in the hands of this wizard, so he screams, "Why Cantel?" and she starts to feel pain, asking what that is, and Andre starts to say that it is like this, even though she should look at him, saying that this is exactly how the weak should look. But Muriken goes after Andre, telling him to get away from Kim Cantel, so he is surprised by the black dragon, saying that there are only 2 black dragons left in the world, and from the looks of it he must be Muriken of the Run Candle. He asks if he has awakened from his long sleep, so does that mean the boy next to him is his contractor, and he must be the youngest to leave the house recently. Run Candle, Jean Run Candle. He says he came there on behalf of someone else's contractor, but it looks like he found an unexpected toy. He says that to even things out he will also wake up a friend of his, and so that Snake starts talking from Vioretta's side, invoking a type of magic that looks like black magic. Then the dragon comes back to life with a breath of dark energy. He says that they shouldn't have held back at all and apologizes to his old friend, and Violetta says that she really thought he had died, and the Muriken says that this is crazy, but Violetta says hello to him, and then they start fighting, and Muriken calls the dragon a corpse, telling him to get out, but Violetta says that even though he has become weak, he still has a really dirty mouth, and he tells Muriken to go back to sleep, dancing a Rasengan at close range. However, Muriken manages to dissolve into dark energy and appears behind the dragon, punching him in the back, but Violetta manages to block his punch, saying that she would feel bad if it were too easy, so he tells Muriken to be happy because he will appear in the story as the one who killed a legend from the past, but Muriken tells him to keep dreaming. In the meantime, Andre goes to Kim Cantel, saying that they will stay there too, and says that he planned to give a better excuse, but now that she saw this she will have to die. But then he feels Jin's presence and notices that the boy had been there since then, and Jin in turn starts to invoke photonic magic, and Andre says that even his kid like him interferes, nothing will change, but he gives the burning a flash bang clothes, leaving Andre blind, and he manages to cut the boy, and Violetta starts to get desperate, attacking the boy, and Muriken tells him to dodge, but he doesn't manage to do it in time and is hit and thrown away, but he manages to deflect the attack with his sword, but even so, he is hit against a rock, and as soon as he realizes what is happening, that evil snake is almost biting him along with a Verita attack, and the boy, with nothing to do, puts his hand on his chest and crushes the rock from his chest sister against the ground, and so she is summoned there with a beam of energy, and she says that he never tried to talk to her even once, but it seems that this was too much for him to handle alone, while making a badass entrance onto the battlefield and going back in time a little before Jim attacks. He was planning to do something, but he says it would be crazy if he got into a fight between dragons with his current strength. He says the only place he can help is against Andre, but he can feel him behind him and all that. He ends up calling her his sister, and then Andre recognizes that that is the white whale, and she realizes that that is the second in command of the Zipfel clan and his wind dragon. She says that something of that level must be good for him to have her called. He says that Jean made a good job having them as an opponent and asks if he was hurt. He says that in fact he was going to be hit by his attack right away, but she managed to come to help him. He thanks her and she gets a little emotional, asking Andre if he intends to remain silent, and she says that she thought he would tell her how this mess started with his brother, and then he notices that her opponent is the deputy patriarch of the Zipfel clan and a dragon revived by an artifact that has divine powers, and even though she is his sister he did not have sure if she could take care of it, but now he is sure. He says that this fight is over and the Murican tells him that the boy better back off, saying that it was bad he couldn't block the attack since they took control of the wind, but he has a good sister. And he says that if she had delayed just a little he would have been hit, and she saved the boy's life. And Andre says he didn't expect this variable because he never thought the white whale would appear, but with this he is sure because the Run Kandel broke his promise with the Zipfel clan, and he tells Luna that her brother used magic and says that the Zipfel clan won't let this go, but she says she understands, telling him not to worry because he won't have the chance to report this to his clan, and he gets mad at her arrogance, saying that she forgot her place and that Snake goes after Luna again, but she tears her into pieces and she says that all the Zepfel she saw were all bullshit and it looks like the deputy patriarcha is nothing different, and so she starts again, and the dragon puts his tail in front to protect Andre but receives several blows to his body, so Luna asks if he will continue maintaining his original dragon form as it is much easier to hit her that way, and he starts to get angry, undoing his transformation. Then Andre calls for him but he says he already understands, and then the two summon a spear of wind and Andre helps him with the divine imbue artifact, that spear with the dark power that they are using, and Luna realizes that that power is not magic and is practically its own ability, but it is also similar to demonic energy, and she says that the reason why the wind dragon is going all out like this is that he probably needs time to use this artifact properly, and she says that she didn't think that the second one in Zipfel clan command and a wind dragon would be depending on a mere tool half mouth, so she asks if they really thought that that little thing could save them, and when they launch that attack in Luna's direction she can easily dodge it, and the dragon starts to get more and more angry, asking how dare she say that because she doesn't know anything, so she manages to deflect that attack and the dragon tries to attack her again and she stops each of her attacks again until the point of putting pressure against him, and the dragon finds himself caught in her attack and soon he receives a kick in the stomach and falls bent over stunned by it, and she says that she thinks this is his limit, and she says that she thinks he has nothing left to show her, so get it over with by raising your sword to the skies, and she calls this the third decisive lethal move of the Run Kandel. Then a beam of energy goes directly through the clouds and the image of her face is simply cinema, and lowering the attack she calls it a meteor shower, and Jean remembers Zed saying that his clan's swordsmanship can be described with a single word, violence, and it is destructive and decisive, and he orders them to battle, capture and take advantage of the mentality of Run Kandel is inside the sword, and he says that is why their blades don't has a defined form and the only thing that exists are the secret techniques and the decisive lethal moves that exist to finish off enemies. Then Jim realizes that that is the third decisive lethal move of the Run Kandel meteor shower, and she destroys half of the island with that, and he realizes that it is blindingly beautiful and frightening, and when Zipfel receives the attack he is pulverized, and Jean notices that this attack is powerful but different from what we thought. Viorita puts herself in front of Andre telling him to wake up, and Andre wakes up, asks how this is possible because she is not even a contractor with the powers of a god, and you're not using it either, an artifact, and he wonders how she can do this with only human powers, but the dragon calls him again saying that at least he needs to stay alive and if he survives they still have a chance, and he states that the demon god's orb can turn the situation, and he says that even if he dies protecting him he will be able to revive him with this, so Andre is convinced, saying that this is not yet it's over, and he says that as long as he has the death of the demon god in his hands he won't die, and he says that as long as he has it he can become a god, and the attack continues to hit, and a while later Luna is a little crestfallen, saying that he is far from reaching his father's level, but she says that this should be a good lesson and also a good motivation for Final Jin if he couldn't reach his father's level. She hopes that his little brother can, but then she notices something strange about in front of him, a tall, slender demon with that stone in the middle of his body, so he starts talking to her, and Luna says that it hurts his pride because it will be a pain if he is stubborn in front of his little brother, so the demon starts praying to her, and Jean asks what is that, and Murican says that now he is sure the Zepfel are using contractor to make the orb of origin, and Jean is in doubt about this term, and he says that it is one that gods created to keep others under control, and luckily it seems that still it's at a low level, but that doesn't change the fact that it's dangerous, so he asks the boy to leave, but the boy wants to continue, saying that they have to fight together because he can't let his older sister take care of a dangerous situation like this alone, but Murican says that no, his sister is more than who is strong enough to take care of it alone, and tells the boy to go quickly because they need to get away, and he starts to get frustrated because he made a contract with Soddard and also met Murican Murokin. After returning he may have started his journey with luck and incredible abilities, but he looks at himself, he doesn't believe he has to run away without even fighting properly, and he thinks that if it stays like this it will be the same as before, and he says he will never go through that again. He never wants to feel powerless again, and he says he needs to get stronger. And Murokin notes the boy full of boldness, saying he knew he wasn't a coward, but he doesn't believe the boy has a fighting spirit like that. After seeing that, and he feels enormous pride, saying it makes you want to bite him. He says that this is more than enough. He tells him not to let the fighting spirit that ignited in his talents go out, and Murokin says that as long as he keeps this with him he will be the strongest, and Murokin says that until then he will take care of it. He is her contractor after 1,000 years. So Luna is in disbelief, because I think she will be able to kill him just because he changed his appearance a little. She says he is throwing a tantrum because of his disappointments, but he says that this is a shame, so he points out at her throwing a ray, burns her clothes, but she manages to withstand the attack with her sword. And Andre starts saying that the power of 10 gods are with him, and he asks Luna Run Candle what she has, because she has nothing but that giant sword of hers, and sends for her to admit defeat and submit to him, and even if her father was there it wouldn't do any good. But Luna says that for a swordsman a simple sword is enough, while it becomes 200% more badass, and she says that he faced with the magic he has been cultivating his whole life, and that it might be enough to make her use half her strength, and she says it's just out of piteous going to show him something that he will never be able to follow with this fake little item. And she says that she is going to show him what a sharp blade is like, about to get stronger, and her sword starts to catch fire. He notices that it is a crimson aura, and he says who has fought against several swordswomen but has never seen anything like it. He asks what that thing is by Jadama, giant lady, and calling her arrogant because she didn't give up after seeing her strength. She will see how weak she is, but Luna keeps attacking, part feeling him in half with a single attack, and she calls it the blade of the mind blood moon, and she splits him in two. After she cuts the origin orbit starts a very big explosion. It starts sucking everything around as if it were a black hole, and she realizes that she is being pulled in. Then she hears Jean screaming, and Murokin comes down to her, and the boy asks for her to hold her hand, and she realizes that today the youngest also saved her. And the people of Vermont are incredulous that an entire island has taken over, and Hats also says that in addition a strange vortex appeared and started pulling everything nearby. They say who detected an abundance of mana nearby. It had human mana but also clearly mana from the silver dragon and the wind, and he states that the spies believe it to be Violetta du Zipfel. After all, moments before the incident they saw him crossing the border, and it looks like that the dragon wind is dead. So the leader is incredulous about this because a dragon scale is in Raja's hand. He talks about human mana. He asks if he found out who it was, then he says it was probably from the contractors, and the leader is in doubt after hiring their guardians and strange energy left over, and he says this might have to do with that thing they're developing. He asks about Andre, asking if he confirmed his situation, but he says he's still investigating. So the leader knocks on the table, saying that it seems like he's been missing a lot of things in his reports lately. He asks if he hasn't found out yet who the Kin Cantel guests were. There's nothing he can do if Raj couldn't find out who could, and he tells him not to say anything to the press, and if Enya isn't found by tonight he tells Hats to consider her lost, and he tells him to send more of his forces. Specials for Zipfel, only the useful ones, because they can have a friendly relationship with them, but they made a huge mess without warning, and he says that Hats should already know because he is not a patient guy, and he hopes that he probably knows that. So Hats, he says that he will meet expectations by calling him your Imperial Majesty, and that is Arm Vermont, the Emperor of Vermont. And meanwhile Buvard is incredulous that they used the orb of the demon god and Visho. What I say yes, because the silver dragon and the dragon of wind they fought in the Sea of Ver, and because of that an entire island disappeared, and he says that they say the only thing that was left was a vortex, but he is sure that that was the orb breaking. So Buvard says how they could destroy his masterpiece like that, and he says he ordered him not to use it recklessly until it was finished, and he says he can't forgive them and say that they will complain to them right now because these stupid mages don't know the value of their work, and soon, since I think that the Zipfel idiots ruined his plans, and thanks to that the day they will kill that pig praising was only postponed. And then the Buvard says he knew that. I think he is pissed because he can feel his bloodlust right now, and little did he know that the bloodlust is aimed at Buvard. So he says that finally his leader is furious because of this. He says he is reconsidering his alliance with Zipfel. He says that now he will ignore any message that the Zipfel clan sends for now. Then a flame is lit, and soon someone with an orb appears and says that it looks like Andre is dead, and then the red dragon behind him says that he thought he had gone with Violet, and he also says that he even took the orb from the two demons, but that man says that it could be one of two things: either the silver dragon was more powerful than they thought, or someone from outside intervened. And the dragon asks who it could be, and soon he remembers that the man recently said that a shadow dragon killed the cemetery giant in 15 weeks. He soon remembers Misha, and everything would make sense if it were her, and she wouldn't be afraid of the demon's orb either. And the man asks if by Michin he means Murokin's sister, and the dragon says yes, and that Cantel is his ex, and you can't say that they are not related. And the man says he understands and says he thinks his role has already been decided, calling the dragon Kadam. So he asks if he wants him to find her. He says that this is impossible, because if a black dragon decides to hide, no one can find him, but the man tells him to stop, cry and say that finally it's a shame that they lost the orb. But the dragon asks if he's not sad that his brother died, and he says that of course he is, but he knew that one day it would happen, and he says that he was surprised when he visited Soren's banquet without even telling him. But the dragon tells him to stop lying because they can ask the fragmenter to get out TR orb anyway, and he says that without that they wouldn't be able to take down the Run Candle even after Soren dies, and the same valley for the kings of the Black Sea. So the man says that it's not Kadam who should find this tiring, and the dragon says that this is already crying, and he says that someone who is trying to dominate the world should at least do that, especially he who wants to become the god of that world. And Kellark gives a very macabre smile, and during the night someone knocks on the Gelly room, and when she leaves she sees that they have returned, and the boy asks if she can prepare dinner for them as they didn't eat anything during their flight there, and soon she starts to get surprised because even Miss Luna came, and soon she faints, and Murikan is shocked by this, calling the strawberry pie. So when Gil wakes up she starts to get scared that Jin will be kicked out of the house, but Luna says that it seems like she got everything wrong and says that this is her level of concern, she must be a good person, and Jean says that she doesn't deserve to have someone like her. So Kashmir gets there and sees that Jean has come back, asking who those people are, and then Jean starts introducing people, saying that that's his sister, older Luna Hun Candel, that she recognizes him as Kashmir Blade Phantom, and he says that this is a shameful nickname he has, but it is an honor to know that she already knows him. So he introduces someone else, saying that Kim is the dragon guardian of the Lady Enia, Kim Cantel the silver dragon, and with the way Kim Cantel looks at him the guy starts to tremble, bending down again noticing that it is a dragon, and again then he reiterates his presentation, saying that he is Kashmir, leader of the seven-colored peacock and Jin's ally. He says that he won't make a mistake like last time, so Jean gets straight to the point, saying that he didn't want to bother him but wanted to ask for something, but that Cantel gets straight to the point, asking where is Enia. He says that he was going to talk about it now 3 hours ago. The later returned, and Jim is incredulous about this. He says that Enia is with his daughter now. He says that there is something strange because later doesn't remember anything after he disappeared, and when he talks to the dragon that they kidnapped him, and he says that it is impossible, and he says he only remembers when Viorita told him that he would teach draconic magic, but he doesn't remember anything after that. And Kashmir says that he seemed to be doing very well for someone who was supposedly threatened by the Zipfel clan. He says that maybe he couldn't have been kidnapped, but that Cantel, he says no, because the Zipfel confessed this in front of him, and the Murikan guesses that they are getting rid of the evidence, and he says that they are erasing everything related to the demon god's orb, and the later memories are linked to this. He says that this Zipfel specialty, when something goes wrong they just need to erase people's memories of it. Kashmir asks what the death of the demons is, and Jean says it's an artifact they were carrying, and then explains it in more detail so you can talk about what happened to the vice patriarch and the wind dragon. He says that this is the artifact that absorbed the contractor. So Kashmir says that Jean went through a lot, but he says for what reason. Jean says that he only has one reason for killing the two demons, that in reality it is a replica of the orb from the origin. He says that he is to become a god, and Murikan says that they are gathering powers from all the existing gods to massacre everyone who goes against them, and thus become the only living god who will rule the entire world. And Kashmir asks them to rest for now because they from the peacock of the seven colors will find out as much as possible, and he asks if Witch Cantel would like to be taken to Enia, and she soon agrees to go. Then Jim wakes up calling his master, so he asks if she is feeling better. She says yes, but when he looks at Luna she faints again. So after things calm down, Luna learns that he eradicated Tezen, a notorious secret organization that decided to make the city free of Tychon as a base, and killed the deputy patriarch of the Zipfel and Varita clan. He says that he managed to do all this even before having spent 2 months as a provisional flag bearer, but she says that due to his magic and inherent abilities he will not only be officially recognized but will also have to be careful with his life. When they find out about this, she says that he is becoming an incredible person, and Geely says that she thought it would all be over when Luna found out, but she didn't think it would be like that. And then Luna says that she didn't want to scare him, and says that she can just pretend she didn't see. So she says that everything what you have to do is hide it from the patriarch, but she says that knowing her father, she's sure he already knows. And upon hearing this, Gilly pinches the cat, and Luna says that everything from Tezen's annihilation and Andre's death is likely that soon minus him discover that Luna is in the middle of everything, and Jim is in doubt, asking if this wouldn't be a big deal, but Jim tells her not to worry as he already has a plan for this, and he says that he was planning to go go see his father with his sister and they even stay calm, noticing that he has a plan. But when he comes to his senses, he asks what the fuck he's trying to do, wanting to see the patriarch. And Luna says that she knows the boy isn't normal, but he should just sit there and do nothing. While his father pretends not to see what is happening, she asks what he wants to try to talk to him, and Jean says he will let him know. He will say that the Zipfel clan is making a scheme to take down the Run Candle, and he asks if it wouldn't be better to talk since even the orb of the demon god is involved. But Luna says she's sure he knows what happens when the provisional flag bearer comes back early without permission, and so she asks if he's really going to want to give up his test, and Jim says that surely the patriarch already knows that he's in the middle of everything, and how did it get to this point? He must go in person, tell him, and also use it to make a proposal. So Luna asks what proposal it would be. She thinks it's something that even her older sister would do. She says that if Jean does that her father will kill him, and Jean says that she trusts that when it arrives at this point, your sister will protect you. Then she starts walking closer to Jean and stops in front of him, looking at the boy eye to eye, and then she laughs, saying that now she understands how much Geely suffers because her sister doesn't even know what to do with her, the boy, and so she agrees to go with him, asking when they go. So he says he's thinking about using the first transfer portal the next morning. So Luna says it's okay because it's better to be punished sooner rather than later, and Geely asks why she's helping him, and the girl says her family is made up of people busy taking each other down. He must have at least someone by his side, and that's why she will be the shield this time. And she says this because she knows that to do all this the boy must have some trick up his sleeve. So Jean give a little laugh, saying that she got it right. And then in the Garden of Swords they say that instead of scolding him she brought him there, and the other Run Candle sister, who has no idea what her name is, asks Luna if she thinks even though that makes sense, and soon Luna tells Jim that it's great that he's grateful for her, and then Vigo starts to get all pompous, saying that the youngest doesn't care about anything, and asks him why he came back and questions the boy how dare he, a future flag bearer, becomes the Garden of Swords. And Melee says that this is the oldest result is being soft too much, and says that he is diverting from the responsibility of being a reserve flag bearer, and says that Luna must also think that this is too much, and she thinks that everyone seems to be well prepared for this as expected. Her father must know, so his psychopath sister says that this is shocking and asks if the youngest gave up his right to become a flag bearer. But she says no, and maybe after he reached puberty he became curious to know what happens after death. But she gets angry, saying that he can't do that because he still needs to fight her after he grows up in this. Runa asks why she brought him there, but she says it wasn't her, and the boy came because he wanted to, but she says Luna should have stopped him, she shouldn't be reckless like him. So she runs out of things to say, and they just send who knows where her father is, and Jean thinks that at some point Luna found it difficult to deal with Huna, and then MMA asks Jean if he came after his father, and he says yes, and everyone they start to get pissed off, asking if he really wants to die because he must be lucky to have survived, and he asks if Jim thinks he's someone just because he's a little better than his Tana brothers, and Runa gets tired of this, telling him to go because his father is in the study room, and the boy walks past her calmly, and she points her sword at Luna's neck, and she says that from now on the first flag bearer must leave his weapon, and this is a direct order from the patriarch, and he said for the reserve flag bearer to go alone. Then Luna she freaks out, saying what will happen if she doesn't want to, and then everyone gathers around her, and Huna goes back to saying that this is the first one's last chance, saying that it is an order from the patriarch telling her to drop her weapon, saying that she will die without resisting, and Luna seems very willing to resist, but Jean tells her not to worry because as a member of the Run Candle family, not like his son, he came to talk to his father and nothing bad will happen to him, so he tells her to go ahead and leave his gun, and Vigo alone manages to call him sick, and after he leaves towards his father's room he says that he knew that his other brothers didn't know him very well, although the reserve flag bearer returning home is against the rules. It's not like his father cares about the rules, and if he gives him a chance to explain just like last time nothing will happen. But then he knocks on his father's door, and he breaks it in front of Jean, saying that it seems like his expectations were too high in the boy. He has sure he gave it 5 years, and asks because the boy has already returned, and Jean is incredulous because the door broke in front of him, but his father was on a balcony and he thinks he has already heard about it. He says that the energy from his sword completely annihilates his enemies, and he also says that his father uses a sword made of aura. He must be showing him what will happen if he uses it, but Jim thinks it looks like he is weaker than he thought. So his father says he won't ask twice, and the boy asks if a son has to have one reason to visit his father, and he thinks he can't say sorry even if he dies. He needs to be confident but not arrogant, so he says he came because he missed his father, and if not he goes crazy hearing this, thinking about the boy missing him, and he wonders if he has ever heard this from any of his children before. He says it's not bad at all, so he calls the boy mature, asking if he became soft after being exposed to the world, but he says it's not because of that, and says he always liked his father. But soon a wave of murderous intent comes over the boy, and he wonders if he said something wrong, but his father thinks thinks in turn that he almost laughed, so he says he didn't expect that from Jean and tells him to stop inventing fashion and go straight to the subject, asking what I brought there, and he talks about the deputy leader of Zipfel, Andre Zipfel, who he insulted during the banquet, died, and Soren asks if it was Jean who killed him, but the boy says it wasn't Sister Luna, but he says he was the one who put her in that situation, and besides, there are a few more things, and he asks if his father gives him permission to report everything, so he says that the boy is insolent and allows him to continue talking, telling him to sit down because he will listen to him. So the patriarch says that starting on the day here until Vermont, Jean has been through a lot recently, so he asks why he came here and asks if the boy thinks he caused any imbalance in the world after killing the second in command of a powerful clan, so he asks if that's what he came to tell him, but Jean says that Andre is not really the second strongest. He says that it is true that his sister was strong, but there was no second in command of Zipfel being the one who could destroy Run Kandel, and Jean says that although it is just a guess, so his father says that he's right, as he says he was simply second in command and it's hard to call him second strongest, and he says there's another more powerful person in line behind him, although it's something he can't tell you right now. So Jean thanks him for confirming his suspicions, but he still hasn't said the most important thing. His father asks what it was. He says that they used a strange artifact, and his father asks what strange artifact, and says that Andre called it an orb demon god. He says that from what he discovered it is an imitation of something called the Orb of Origin made by the gods a long time ago, so his father asks if Murican told him about it, and Jean asks if his father already knew, and the patriarch says that not only that he also knows that he is using mana, and he questions if Jean and thought he could even manage to hide it, and Jean says that he already imagined it but didn't know that he also already knew about the Morakan, but his father starts to laugh and says that as he says he merely assumed that he had woken up, but the boy confessed very easily, so he calls him Murican from Garfield. Run Kandel, the great powerful black dragon, was reduced to a domestic cat. Bro Soren is spending Murican and notices that it looks like his father is having fun, and the patriarch returns to the subject about the replica of the Orb of Origin and says that he really brought it. It's great news. He's going to need to talk to Luna too, and he thinks he doesn't know how far the Zipfel went with this, but this power is certainly dangerous, and he wonders if the kings of the Black Sea know this, and Soren says they are fragments from the Origin's orbit, and if they knew, they would do something about it. He needs to return to the Black Sea, and his father says that just this once he will forgive him for breaking the rules, but the boy wouldn't be satisfied with just that, and he asks what Jean wants, and he asks that during this time his father not allow no Run Kandel to travel through the city free of Tychon, and then his father notices that that is the place he secretly made his main base, so he says that's right, and in return he must do this, and he tells the boy to make Kashmir from the Blade Ghost join him and prove to be his ally. And Soren says that if he achieves this, none Run Kandel will be able to set foot in Tychon without his permission, so he says the boy has a year to do so. He should bring that insolent fool who refused to be a Run Kandel instructor, who tells the boy to prove that he can persuade him, but soon after Kashmir is already facing Soren, so he says everything is fine, that's what happened. Meanwhile Kashmir is blank in front of the man, and in Kashmir's mind he thinks that he is the strongest knight in the world, Soren Run Kandel, and he wonders if this is the dignity of the strongest of humanity, and he feels like he is going to vomit just meeting him, but he says no because he is the guest of the Master Jean, so he doesn't need fear Lord Soren. But when he asks if he is the Kashmir of the Ghost Blade, he soon bows, saying that it is embarrassing for Lord Soren to call him the Ghost Blade, asking him to please not do that, and then Jean talks to his father saying that to describe his relationship with Kashmir is that their destiny is intertwined, so he says that he has already proven his relationship with him, and says that this is his father's turn to fulfill his part of the agreement, and Kashmir thinks that if Jean talks about destinies interconnected, so it will be up to him, and he immediately thinks about Soren, thinking that this talk about the fate of the interconnected is wrong, thinking that it would mean that Tychon belongs to Run Kandel, and he immediately thinks that the patriarch is going to take over the city, and thinks that Tychon's independence is going by down the water. And then Soren calls his son a brat, asking if he is proud of deceiving his father, and Jim asks what he means by deceiving, because he was just lucky, so his father says everything is fine, and says that the boy started to leave. From now on no Run Kandel will be able step on Chi-Kan without the boy's permission, and soon Kashmir is impressed, saying that from now on their destinies are linked eternally, so his father tells the boy that if he has nothing more to say he should leave because he has something to talk to Kashmir, and then Jim says that he will be waiting outside the mansion, leaving the guy there in the back of his head, and he says that he finally met Kashmir and says that they are going to talk a little, and from outside the brothers come running to ask Jean if he is okay. Then they ask why Jean did it this, and also asks if his father is going to leave the boy alive. Then he realizes that the boys must have been hiding in some corner since the atmosphere was tense. He says that he needs a small favor, and he says that it's no big deal, saying that the cadets from his faction, he wants them to take care of them while he is away, and says he will notify them personally before leaving. And the boys find it strange that he is talking about his faction, asking if there is anything more important. He also asks if he is okay with it, and Jim asks since when do they worry about him anyway, he will just leave it in in his hands and the boys notice that he is the same as before, asking how he stays calm after talking to his father, and they notice that as expected Jean is a little scary, and soon when he returns to Vigo, he is scared to see the boy and he tells his older sister that she needs to go talk to her father because he said he wanted to ask her some things about that day, and then I start barking asking if he didn't notice the current situation and asking if he is ignoring them, but he apologizes to her saying that he can't tell her, and she starts to think that the boy is arrogant asking how dare he, and then Kashmir arrives to talk to the boy and Jim asks if the conversation was good and he shows on his face that it wasn't that long and he says that it was yes and thankfully, and then I come back barking talking to the forastero because he also entered a while ago. He asks what he is doing asking how dare he enter the Jardim do Run Candle in this. The first flag holder asks for her to stop because the patriarch has already taken care of it, they don't need to continue with this scene anymore. Then Mio gets mad and Jean thanks his sister again, apologizing for always bothering him, but she tells him to stop because he just needs to thank her, and she asks too if he is already going and he says yes because he plans to go back and focus on his training for a while. She tells him to be well. Then after saying goodbye to his brothers a month later at the underground training camp in Kashmir, Jim Tun Kandel is on his 30th fight simulated against Elisa Better and is also on Jean Run Candel's 30th defeat, so he asks to go against her once again but is told that this will soon be his 31st defeat. And guys, if you liked it off this video and want more videos like this on the channel, leave a like and subscribe. Let's go rum and 100,000 subscribers, so I'll see you in the next video, and I went.